suffering as the victims, and second, he's more worried about how bad this makes the church look rather than bringing justice for the victims. In our sixth spot, we have hiding the past. People are incredibly furious how the Pope handled all of the allegations made against the priests. The right thing for him to do would be allow criminal authorities to access the church records worldwide, so they can try and get justice for all the victims and get rid of the men taking advantage of their power and position. But of course, he won't allow that, nor will the other men who run the church. Instead, it's let's keep it all hush hush and hope no other victims come forward. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with the years of cover-ups. Back in 2018, it was revealed that Bishop Juan Barros of Chile was accused of covering up clerical abuse for years. The bishop denied, saying he never knew about this, but one of the victims say that he was there when one of the incidents happened and bore witness to it all and then did nothing. For years, this bishop covered up several incidences and protected the perpetrators. This just makes me sick. After being called out though, he did resign. Coming in at number 4, we have the punishments for disobeying. Bishop Gonzalo Duarte Garcia de Cortazar is another member of the Catholic Church that used his power to take advantage of a number of individuals. There were reports of him doing this all the way back to 1992. Back in 1992, he publicly slapped a student because the student refused to kiss him on the lips. In fact, this was common. If the students wouldn't do as he told them to, they would be slapped or punished. And Bishop Juan Barros was responsible for covering this all up, so word wouldn't get out. Coming in at number 3, we have the slush funds. The church has also been known to do sketchy and illegal things with their money, such as move Vatican money through slush funds across Europe. On top of that, they used $250 million of the church's money to invest in luxury London apartments, which ultimately tanked. They even contemplated investing hundreds of millions of dollars into oil fields. This money was supposed to support palpable charities. They also have a history of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. How great is that? Of course though, they'll always get away with it because they're the church. Moving on to number 2, we have the ties with Hitler. Did you know that during World War II, the church actually made a deal with Hitler? Yeah. The deal allowed the dictator to increase his power in Germany without interference from the church if he promised to basically leave the church alone. So instead of standing up to him and the horrors that he was committing, they turned a blind eye and were like, leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. On top of that, in 1939, on the dictator's 50th birthday, they flew Nazi flags for him. Then they actually received tons of money from him, but used the IOR to hide this, so it wouldn't look like they profited from their relationship with the dictator, when in fact, we all know that they did. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Catholic clergy in France. Just this year, it was found that Catholic clergy members in France took advantage of over 216,000 individuals over the past 7 decades. Again, that is absolutely disgusting. On top of that, a report found that the church prioritized its own protection, so it told the victims to stay silent. It said that between 29,000 to 32,000 predators worked in the French Catholic Church between 1950 to 2020. The report also found, and I quote, the church's attitude could be summarized as one of concealment, relativization, or even denial, with only a very recent recognition dating from 2015. The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse.
In at number 10, this creepy video was captured at the Lincoln Cathedral in England. First of all, the exterior of this church looks like it could be the set of a horror movie, and what possessed this person to go to church at night? I have no idea. Well, it's a little bit too dark and windy for my liking. Well, things took a turn for the worse when they stumbled across this. Well, take a look for yourself. Okay, did I see that right? It looks like a face is protruding from the wall, and then all of a sudden it disappears when the cameraman went to investigate it. I'd be getting the heck out of there, and I'd probably never return to that church ever again. I'd probably have to make a pit stop to another church because I have to do some Hail Marys after seeing that ghost head. A creepy art project is up next at number 9. The St. George Church was left abandoned after the roof collapsed. The locals in the area saw this as a bad omen, so they didn't even want to repair the church. But I guess an art student took it upon themselves to fill in the pews with creepy ghost figures instead. Take a look. Okay, this is not okay in my books. Actually, this might be the scariest art project that I've ever seen. I feel like if the church wasn't haunted before, well, it definitely is now. A shadowy figure is up next at number 8. This extremely scary picture was taken inside of a Catholic church somewhere over in Poland. Everyone there was celebrating a first communion, but the party was crashed by the shadowy figure who was seen creeping between the aisles. It's quite possible that this is just a result of a camera malfunctioning, but the thing is, are you willing to bet your life on that? I know I'm not. Insane insect infestation crawls onto our list at number 7. I get it, sometimes older buildings have an insect problem. You might see the occasional ant or centipede. You know, I can forgive that, but what I can't forgive is this. Is this real life right now? Is this the only church in town? Why are people content with this? How the heck can you be singing at a time like this? I mean, you all need to bathe in some holy water and all stand in front of a strong fan to get all of those termites off of you. This is not okay. I'm pretty sure this church needs an exorcism and an exterminator at the same time. Number 6, the man with glowing eyes. During a service at a church, someone accidentally captured this picture of a man with some pretty unsettling eyes. Some people are even saying that this creature isn't even human, while others think that he's wearing glasses and it's just the light reflecting off of them. I honestly don't know what to believe. He kind of looks like a gnome from hell, and those people in the church might be in a whole lot of trouble. But did you guys also notice there's a weird floating object hovering over the guy next to the gnome? I mean, what the heck is going on in this church? I think everyone inside needs to be blessed. Bringing us to number 5, we have a ghost spirit caught on camera. A paranormal investigation team were exploring an old abandoned church in England, well, when they stumbled across this eerie sight. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. As you can see, a ghostly figure passes by one of the windows, and it looks like they're wearing a long white dress or robe of some sort. This church dates back to 1135, so it's very possible that it's had its fair share of scary ghost encounters. Next up on our list, number 4, we have a Jesus statue caught moving. Okay, pay close attention to the statue's eyes, because what I'm about to show you guys is gonna happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. How the heck did the guy filming this have no reaction whatsoever? I'm completely traumatized, and I wasn't even there for that. I feel like Jesus was staring into my soul, and he didn't even like what he saw, so he just closed his eyes. This statue of Jesus Christ is located inside of the church in Mexico, and since this video was released, thousands of people have been going to this church to watch the statue move for themselves. But I'm pretty sure a moving statue would just deter me from ever visiting it. A ghost makes an appearance at a shrine, and this takes us to number 3. This next clip I'm about to show you guys was taken in a church over in Ireland. This church houses the national shrine of Saint Oliver Plunkett, who was an Irish saint who was condemned to death. And that was although he was completely innocent. So you're gonna see his cell door and possibly Saint Oliver Plunkett himself. Watch.
The Aliyah of Israel today is a modern miracle. Against all odds, our people came up from the graves of the Holocaust to this very land. In one day, a nation was born, and Jewish people from around the world began returning to their historic homeland. But is the rebirth of our nation just a testimony of grit and good luck, or are we part of a much greater story? What does modern Israel have to do with the biblical Aliyah of Ezra and Nehemiah over 2,400 years ago?
Most Israelis know quite well about the formation of Israel from school and their training in the IDF, but many are unaware of the echoes of our biblical past in our present day and what it means for the Jewish people.
In this episode, we're going to look at what the scriptures have to say about the rebirth of the state of Israel and the incredible parallels hidden in our past and present, and seek to answer the questions. Does national Israel exist purely by chance, or a historical error as some claim? Or is it by divine providence and as part of God's plan for all mankind? And if God truly established our return, what's next?
In Ezekiel 37, the prophet declares, "Surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land."
One of the most famous Jewish commentators of all times, who lived 700 years ago, noticed a repeating trend in Scripture and thus coined a well-known term to describe it. The acts of the fathers is the sign for the sons. Simply put, God has written history together in a way that as we look to the events of the past, we can learn of our present and of our future. Many times in Scripture, we see past events foreshadowing events to come, prophesizing God's deliverance and judgment.
Let's start by looking back to the timing of some key events in biblical history during the time of the prophet Jeremiah. The people of Judah lost their sovereignty as a nation when Nebuchadnezzar came up to the land and put King Jehoiakim and Judah under servitude around 605 BC.
After a failed rebellion in 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar installed his own vassal king, but peace didn't last long. The Jewish people rebelled against Babylon, and Jerusalem was besieged. In 586 BC, 19 years after the first conquest, Jerusalem was completely destroyed.
Fast forward 70 years, it was Cyrus that issued the decree to rebuild the temple and send our people home. Our people were once again a nation, but only a few actually went back to Jerusalem. While the altar was built, very few people lived in the city since it wasn't secure, and our people were in peril from our neighbors.
This is the door of the cell in Newgate Prison, where St. Oliver Plunkett was in prison for 8 months.
He's a very interesting figure, because he was...
Okay, no, you're not crazy. I think I saw him as well. So it could be possible that his spirit is still attached to the cell door, or could something more sinister be going on here? Well, you know what? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jesus is caught moving again, and this takes us to number 2. Seriously, what is up with all these moving Jesus statues? Stop it! I'm really not okay with this, but you guys clicked on this video, so you know what? Here's another scary clip for you.
Fortunate propaganda is used upon the masses. What's gonna lead?
Okay, what did I just watch? This is the reason why I don't go to church. There's too much scariness happening there. I think I'm developing an irrational fear of Jesus statues. I thought church was supposed to be a safe place, but instead of being comforted, I'm being tormented. Dark, shadowy figure creeps onto our list at number 1. Well, take a look at this picture right here. It looks like the church might have a demon problem, maybe multiple demons. I don't know what's worse, those termites that we just saw or this devilish demon. And I can't even make out what this thing is. It looks like he has really long arms and legs. Maybe he's a spider demon. Well, whatever he is, I never want to see him in the flesh, because I honestly don't think that I would be walking out of that church alive.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Vatican Library. The Vatican Library is a very secret library closed to the public. The only people that have access to it are popes and people that have gone through a lengthy screening process. And even then, they need to know exactly what they are wanting information on and will only be given info on what they ask for. This library is the top secret library with history and documentation since the beginning of time. The amount of dark gossip that is within those walls, I'm sure, is exponential. From the little that we know, the Vatican Library holds letters from world leaders throughout history detailing major events that us little guys will probably never be privy to. I'm sure they even have documentation on alien sightings. The church refuses to talk about what they have and know, and it's really just a shame. I'm a history lover myself, and truly that would be a magical experience to be able to explore this library. Ah well. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to be recommended more content like this. In our number 9 spot, we have Operation Snow White. On June 20th, 1977, Michael Meisner, a Scientologist, contacted the FBI after allegedly being held captive for months. He revealed that he was a part of the biggest infiltration of the US government in history, in something called Operation Snow White. On July 8th, 1977, 156 FBI agents entered a Scientology center in LA in the largest FBI raid in history. It was discovered that 5,000 Scientology agents infiltrated the IRS, the US Coast Guard Intelligence, DEA, except there were bugged offices, planted false information, stolen files, and so much more found. Apparently, the goal of this initiative was to remove any bad reports about Scientology. Some of the founders were sentenced to a few years in jail.
Me being a
secret
knowledge, I really want to delve into that. I want to figure out more about that.
And I'm sure other churches
I love the
and
ologies,
organizations
beloved. I
have
love
done
the
the same
ologies.
thing. We just haven't heard about it, and perhaps they haven't been covered. In our number 8 spot, we have exorcisms. This one shocked me. I knew that priests could do exorcisms, but I didn't realize that this is something that they do much. I truly thought that exorcisms were done more often in the movies to young girls doing the crab walk down the stairs. Yeesh, thinking of that scene gives me the shivers. Anyways, apparently the Vatican had a chief exorcist named Father Gabriel Amorth, who had served over 60 years to the church and had performed over 160,000 exorcisms. Excuse me? Wow. How have there been that many people infiltrated by demons and this info isn't more widely talked about? Also, that is just this guy's number. Apparently popes and priests around the world perform exorcisms all the time. I'm shooketh. I could understand that the church wouldn't want to talk about this because it is a private, very sad thing to happen to a person, but man, that's a lot of people walking around feeling like they have demons within them. Pretty scary. In our number 7 spot, we have His Holiness. His Holiness was a book that was released to the public in 2012, which is based on the secret leaked papers about Pope Benedict. Apparently, the private documents were leaked by the Pope's butler. Yikes. Apparently, after an investigation, it was discovered that the individuals who were not from the Vatican were blackmailing gay bishops because they had broken their celibacy vows. The Pope went on to resign after these documents became public. Well, this is definitely a scandal, that's for sure. I remember people talking about this when it was happening, but I don't remember hearing the church comment on it. But I guess they sort of did through their actions, and I'm sure Pope Benedict was encouraged to resign. In our number 6 spot, we have the dead man on trial. This is a little piece of history that truly terrifies me and is such a testament to those times. In 897 AD, a literal dead man was put on trial. The man had been dead for 7 months. He had been dressed for the occasion by someone whom I'm sure was traumatized afterward. His name was Pope Formosus. He was being put on trial for acts that he had committed in his life. He had a lawyer and everything. He was found guilty and stripped of his former title as Pope, and everything he formerly did was declared void. His body was stripped of his clothes and put into rags before he was thrown into a river, the Tiber River in Italy, specifically because this river was where a lot of criminals' bodies were disposed of. Pretty gross. I wonder if there are any ghost haunting stories from this river. I bet you there are. In our number 5 spot, we have the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank has had its fair share of scandals over the years, and you best believe that the church will not be bringing any attention to it by speaking about it in any way. Allegedly, to start off the scandals, it is said that the Vatican Bank received a church tax from Germany's leader during World War II, if you catch my drift. Also, allegedly, a large amount of money was paid to the IOR so that the Western banks couldn't track the Vatican's spending. The details have never been released to the public, so Lord knows where they put their money. But why would you want to hide your money in the first place? Perhaps so that no one would know what you're up to if you're up to no good, but also possibly because someone might be a threat and that might be a reason to shield what you're doing. Either way, the secrecy is questionable. In our number 4 spot, we have mental illness in the church. When researching for this video, one of the things that shocked me was the amount of people that spoke about how the churches do not handle mental illness very well. You would assume that it would be approached with love and compassion and guidance to get help. But the common theme is that people have been told to just pray and it will make the illness go away. Some believe that this thought process stems from the very old thinking that mental illness stems from demons being in one's body, and so people are being told to pray them away because that's what was always done if someone needed, an exorcism or to get rid of an attached spirit. The biggest problem is that issues go untalked about. The people bottle it up inside, and when prayer doesn't work, the person dealing with the mental illness feels like a failure or like they don't have enough faith. Hopefully this is something that churches of all religions work on improving, as this is just unacceptable at this point in time. In our number 3 spot, we have shame. Within many religions,
So like relax, I'm spilling these raps long as you feel them to the day that I drop. You'll never say that I'm not feeling them. So this is like a full-blown attack. I'm more there has been the problem of spiritual criticism, which has led to emotional harm within the church communities. I'm not talking about outsiders passing judgment, I'm talking about religious community members passing judgments on each other. This bad behavior is committed under the banner of spirituality. From practices of shaming members if they don't fulfill religious expectations, to bad-mouthing members who have left, making people want to stay out of fear. Scientologists have been accused of doing that to members that have tried to leave, but also other churches have been accused of this as well. It's super unfortunate to hear that in communities that have, the core purpose of being loving, they are people that are shaming each other. Talk about not practicing what you preach. In our number 2 spot, we have misusing their power. In recent years, it has become public knowledge that the French clergy took advantage of more than 200,000 individuals since the 1950s, mainly males. The Catholic Church has been accused of turning a blind eye to this happening, and many have been outraged that this went on for so long without someone stepping in. Allegedly, it wasn't until the 2000s that some progress was made. Before that, the church showed complete indifference to the victims. Through a series of investigations, 2,700 victims gave testimonies about what happened to them, and thousands were identified through archives. A wide-range study showed that there could be up to 330,000 victims. In recent years, about 2,900 to 3,200 priests have become suspects to these crimes. Wow. Truly despicable. I hope that there is some kind of justice for these victims. In our number 1 spot, we have the Salem witch trials. Most people believe that the witch trials were a result of many things: bad weather, a poor government, and paranoid leaders. But what a lot of people may not be aware of is the idea that the Catholic and Protestant churches possibly used the trials to compete with each other for followers. Pretty dark. History.com reported that economists Peter Leeson and Jacob Russ believe that, quote, the two churches advertised their finesse at persecuting witches as proof that they were the best church to join if you wanted protection from Satan. Witches, after all, were doing the bidding of Satan, so getting rid of them was a way to protect people from them. Wow. Well, that will definitely persuade 1 or 2 people, that's for sure. It has also been noted that the Catholic Church did not fear or acknowledge witches in history until the Protestant Church became a competitor threat.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have exorcisms. So one would think that exorcisms would be strictly reserved for horror movies and the like, but that is simply not true. They are definitely a real-life nightmare, and the former chief exorcist of the Vatican certainly knows all about them. The late priest, Father Gabriel Amorth, served in this position for more than 60 years, and throughout his career, he is said to have performed approximately 160,000 exorcisms. That's an insane number. What's even more concerning is it's not like he's the only one doing them. There are tons of priests who perform these things. So much so that there's a workshop at the Vatican that has welcomed 250 priests from across the world to learn how to perform such a thing. This is all to say that a lot more exorcisms are happening than I would have liked to think. In our number 9 spot today, we have the man on trial. Okay, history is full of a lot of weird stuff, especially when it comes to laws and court and all of that stuff. Things were really different back then, and this is an example of just how different. In 897 AD, the Catholic Church put a dead man on trial. People have definitely been held accountable after death in our modern society. A posthumous trial can be held for a variety of reasons, but that's not what happened here. No, they actually exhumed the body of this man after he had been dead for 7 months already, and they literally brought his body to the courtroom. Necessary? Probably not. Dramatic? Most certainly. I thought jury duty now was bad. Imagine being the jury for that trial. This man on trial was Pope Formosus, and he was being accused of usurping the papacy. In the end, he was found guilty of this. All of his acts as Pope were declared null and void. His body was then stripped of all official garments and instead dressed in rags. His 3 fingers of benediction were cut off and his body was thrown into the river. They very obviously took this all very seriously. In our number 8 spot today, we have Wine Wednesday. Okay, this one might not be terrifying, but I guess that depends on how you feel about wine. According to reports, it is said that the wine consumption in the Vatican is greater than any other country. Like, statistically, the average person living in the Vatican consumes 20 gallons of wine every year. It's a lot of wine. That's 3 times the average of someone in the UK, 6 times as much as someone in the US, and twice as much as the typical resident of France and Italy. If only there wasn't so much other creepy stuff going on in the Vatican, it might actually be a good time. In our number 7 spot today, we have the crime rate. The Vatican is the smallest state in the world in terms of both area size and population size. Despite this fact, however, it still manages to have one of the highest crime rates in the entire world. Not what you would think for the Holy State, right? The crime rate in the Vatican is said to be 20 times higher than the crime rate in Italy. It's said that there is 1.5 crimes per person. It is said that this is due to the high number of tourists, which makes the area a pickpocket's dream. But who's to say for sure if that's the case? Either way, best to keep your eyes and ears peeled if you're ever walking through those streets, apparently. In our number 6 spot today, we have the digital world. Okay, definitely less terrifying and more just bizarre, or I guess surprising is probably the right way to put it. During his time in the position, Pope Benedict XVI liked to send text messages to his subscribers around the world. Surprisingly, in 2009, the Vatican even opened up a YouTube channel to show different papal addresses and ceremonies. To take this all even a step further, the Vatican even had an app for smartphones. Imagine being the person who created it. The app contained multiple different versions in different languages of a prayer book and the prayers of daily mass. Just months before his resignation, Pope Benedict XVI even got a Twitter account. So, the papacy is going digital, apparently. In our number 5 spot today, we have the secret archives. The secret archives of the Vatican are one of the best known things about the entire state, but what exactly is in them remains much of a mystery. The archives are 53 miles long and there are thousands and thousands of catalogs. Only scholars can access these catalogs, but it still takes quite a bit of time and effort to get a pass to see them. Also, once you're there, you have to request what you want. There's no browsing the archives allowed. The official purpose of these archives is to house important paperwork and things pertaining to the Pope, but many people have speculated about all the secrets that these archives could be holding. Considering how many things and stories most of us have heard about what secrets may be hiding in the Vatican, one can only guess what atrocities may lurk in some of the pages found in these archives. In our number 4 spot today, we have the bank. The Institute for Works of Religion, also known as the Vatican Bank, is certainly no stranger to scandal, as it has definitely seen its fair share over the years. This bank was first established during World War II, during a time that Italy was fighting against the Allied forces. Out of all of the controversies throughout the years, the bank and their dealings with the guy who we'll call Adolf Hitler for the sake of this video is by far the most controversial. It has been reported that the Vatican received a considerable church tax from the evil guy annually. A lot of this money was paid this way so that it couldn't be tracked by Western banks, and this is kind of how the IOR became known as the world's top offshore bank. The Catholic Church has, of course, made use of the IOR to store tons and tons of its money, the extent of which has never been revealed to the public. So we will likely never know exactly what went on with all of these shady World War II dealings. In our number 3 spot today, we have family ties. This is something that really came to light in 1982. In that year, the Vatican Bank president resigned from the role after a series of scandals that ended up exposing the bank's ties to the mafia. In the end, the bank had to repay more than $200 million to its creditors because of this entire scandal. The bank president was never indicted on any of these crimes, but he has been suspected of not only these crimes, but also being involved in several mysterious deaths. Like, what in the world? This is so wild. In the end, he had diplomatic immunity in the United States, and he retired in Arizona in the 1990s, where he lived out the rest of his life. In our number 2 spot today, we have tax evasion. So there's a rule where the Vatican enjoys a property tax break for all non-commercial properties that contain a chapel. It's a pretty sweet deal, and they apparently decided to try and kind of take advantage of that a little bit. Between the years 2001 and 2006, the Vatican allegedly kind of evaded taxes that amounted to a cool 4 billion euros. The European Court of Justice, of course, ruled this entire thing illegal, and that is why the Vatican had to later procure 4 billion euros as post-dated tax. Many people speculate that this is just a drop in the bucket of what they owe in evaded taxes, but I don't even know how to do my own taxes, so who am I to say? In our number 1 spot today, we have the secret court. This one isn't so much a secret anymore, but it was up until 2009. The Vatican has a secret court for sins that are based on conscience. The bishops who handle these hearings are known as the Tribunal of Conscience, and this whole idea was created by Pope Alexander in 1179, and like I mentioned, was kept a secret from the public until 2009. The sins that this court sees range from the spitting out of a communion wafer all the way to things like priests breaking their vow of celibacy, and I'm sure a lot more stuff that we just won't even get into. You know, fun stuff. The tribunal, of course, considers these matters, but the decision-making in the end lies with the major penitentiary.
Number 10, Clara Germana Seely. Clara Germana Seely was a South African Christian girl who in 1906 was said to be possessed by a demon. She is said to have been possessed when she was a schoolgirl at St. Michael's Mission. Clara was an orphan, and at the age of 16, she allegedly made a pact with Satan, and this is said to be the cause of her demonic possession. In an account written by a nun, Clara was said to be able to speak languages of which she had no previous knowledge. This fact was also witnessed by others who recorded that she understood Polish, German, French, Norwegian, and all other languages. The nun also reported that Clara demonstrated clairvoyance by revealing the most intimate secrets and transgressions of people with whom she had no contact. Also, Clara could not bear the presence of blessed objects and seemed powered with extraordinary strength and ferocity, often hurling nuns about the convent rooms and beating them up. According to some, Clara was said to have levitated 5 feet in the air, sometimes vertically and sometimes horizontally, and when sprinkled with holy water, she was reported to have come out of the state of her satanic possession. During the exorcism, Clara's first action was to knock the Holy Bible from the priest's hands and grab his stole in an attempt to choke him with it. At the end of the exorcism, it was said that the demon was forced out and she was healed. Number 9. Ronald Doe. In the late 1940s in the United States, priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on an anonymous boy, documented under the name Ronald Doe. The boy was the alleged victim of demonic possession, and the events were recorded by the attending priest. It said after a family death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving on its own accord, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. The family then turned to their pastor,
for help. During the exorcism, the boy allegedly slipped one of his hands out of the restraints, broke a bed spring from under the mattress, and used it as an impromptu weapon, slashing the priest's arm and resulting in the exorcism ritual being halted. When they did another exorcism, it was stated during the scene that words such as evil and hell, along with other various marks, appeared on the teenager's body. Allegedly, during the litany of the saints portion of the exorcism ritual, the boy's mattress began to shake. Number 8. Barbie Hallet. Barbie Hallet was a young servant in Quebec in the 1660s who was possessed by a demon. Priests and nuns performed rituals to drive the demons away, with the bishop and governor argued about how to investigate their suspicions of witchcraft. A local miller named Daniel Voley, accused of using his knowledge of the dark arts to torment Barbie, was imprisoned and then executed. Barbie continued to experience the symptoms of demonic possession for months even after the alleged witch was executed. The end of Barbie's ordeal came in the form as an exorcism, or what sounds very much like one, conducted by a layperson using a rib bone believed to belong to the deceased Jean de Berbeuf. And fun fact, this was Canada's first documented demon possession case. Number 7. Father Gabriel. In 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome and was dealing with one troubled man. He asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man he was dealing with began to curse and spit and started using English instead of his native Italian. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Father Gabriel said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. He said, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess the servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man, fixed with a glare, snarled and said, "I am Lucifer." Father Gabriel was shocked. He did not expect to receive such a terrifying response. Now, the father mostly used prayer as his weapon, and as Father Gabriel continually commanded the demon to leave its host, it eventually left. Number 6. David Glatzel. In 1981, a young boy named David Glatzel had played host to a demon. After witnessing a number of increasingly ominous occurrences involving David, his family, exhausted and terrified, decided to enlist the aid of Ed and Lorraine Warren in a last-ditch effort to cure him. David's family had seen him being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterward. David also started to growl, hiss, speak in otherworldly voices, and recite passages from the Bible as well. The Glatzel family, along with the Warrens, then proceeded to have a formal exorcism performed on David. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to see the devil sitting in it.
Work goes smoothly when you know the right steps. With Asana, you can coordinate tasks across teams and stay on track, so your team can spend more time celebrating wins. Try it for free at asana.com.
Number 5. Arnie Johnson. And that leads us to our next point of Arnie Johnson. During one of David's exorcisms, Arnie coerced one of the demons to possess him while participating. Afterwards, Arnie's personality completely changed. He would fall into a trance-like state where he would growl and hallucinate, but later have no memory of it. Then one day, after he and his girlfriend Debbie's landlord was drunk and misbehaving, Ernie ended his life. The day after the incident, Lorraine Warren informed the Brooklyn police that Ernie was possessed when the crime was committed. The case then went on to trial where Ernie's defense was demonic possession and the devil made me do it. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days before convicting Ernie of first-degree manslaughter, though he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, though he only served 5. Number 4. Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor became notable in England in 1974 as a result of the Ossett and his alleged demonic possession. Michael lived in Ossett, West Yorkshire, working as a butcher. In 1974, his wife, Christine, stated to a Christian fellowship group to which Michael belonged that his relationship with the lay leader of the group, Marie Robinson, was carnal in nature. Michael admitted that he felt an evil within him, and during the next meeting, Michael received an absolution, but nevertheless, his behavior continued to become more erratic. As a result, the local vicar called in other ministers experienced in the deliverance in preparation to cast out the demons residing within the man. The exorcism, which occurred on the 5th and 6th of October 1974 at St. Thomas's Church in Galber, was headed by Father Peter Vincent and was aided by Methodist clergyman, the Reverend Raymond Smith. The exorcists believed that they had, in an all-night ceremony, invoked and cast out at least 40 demons. At the end, exhausted, they allowed Michael to go home, although they felt at least 3 demons were still left with him. Number 3. Julia. Dr. Richard Gallagher had a girl named Julia come to his house and tell him that she was possessed. Julia exhibited a series of behaviors that constituted a once-in-a-century possession, from speaking in languages she claimed not to have known to allegedly levitating for over half an hour during an exorcism. "I know I'm possessed," Julia told Richard during a consultation. "I space out and then I don't recall what happens. They tell me a voice comes out of me. I don't know. I don't remember anything. It's a demon, I'm sure." Objects would fly off shelves around her. She somehow knew personal details about Richard's life, like how his mother had died of ovarian cancer, and the fact that the 2 cats in his house went absolutely berserk fighting each other the night before one of her sessions. Julia even found a way to reach him even when she wasn't with him, he says. He was talking on the phone with Julia's priest one night when both of the men heard one of the demonic voices that came from Julia during her trances, even though she was nowhere near a phone and thousands of miles away. Number 2. Anneliese Michael. Anneliese Michael was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. When she was younger, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant to various religious objects and began to hear voices. After the taking of psychiatric medications for 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Anneliese and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism. While rejected at first, 2 priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priest began conducting exorcism sessions and the parents stopped consulting doctors. She became increasingly scary, speaking about dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and to the apostate priests of the modern church. A total of 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week, lasting up to 4 hours each, were performed over approximately 10 months in 1975 and 1976. And coming in at number 1 is Anna Upland. Anna Upland's demonic possession and exorcism occurred over several decades, culminating in an extensive exorcism that lasted from August 18th to December 23rd, 1928 in Erling, Iowa. Anna was said to have exhibited symptoms similar to possession beginning as a young girl and was 46 years old during her final exorcism by Father Theophilus Riesinger, a Roman Catholic priest. She would levitate, howl, and hang from the frame of a doorway. The extensive exorcism resulted in deterioration of her body as she refused to consume food, also vomiting foul debris and what appeared to be tobacco leaves. Her head, lips, and face reportedly swelled, and she was also able to speak in multiple languages unknown to her. Anna was believed to be possessed by Judas Iscariot as well as Jacob, her own father, who had cursed her with the help of his lover, and her aunt Mina. On December 23rd, the final day of the exorcism, Father Riesinger commanded the demons in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary to depart to hell. Anna collapsed on her bed and began to shriek, Beelzebub, Judas, Jacob, Mina, followed by hell, hell, hell. She opened her eyes and then spoke in her own voice, saying, My Jesus, mercy, praise be Jesus Christ. The exorcism was successful, and Anna's case is considered by theology and paranormal scholars to be one of the most abundantly documented cases of possession in the 20th century, including a profile in the 1936 issue of Time magazine.
Starting off this countdown, we have absolving sins with money. Basically, back in the day, the Catholic Church told people that they could absolve their sins and get a ticket to heaven if they just paid them. Like, you were paying the church for forgiveness. Sorry, that's not how these things work. It also got to the point where people were paying for future sins. Not only that, they claimed that for a fee, relatives could get their deceased loved ones out of purgatory. And people fell for this all. Not only that, but poor people thought that they were screwed. They're like, if we sin, it's over. We can't afford to pay to get our sins forgiven. I wouldn't be surprised if the rich went around committing crimes and killing people, then being like, here's some cash, I'm all good now, thanks. In our 9th spot, we have imprisoning Galileo. In 1663, Galileo was like, science is greater than God. He also said that the sun was the center of the universe and claimed that the earth moved around it. I mean, he was onto something there, but just, you know, he was slightly off. Anyways, the church didn't like these claims because it conflicted with the teachings of the church, so they imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in his home for years. I mean, they threatened him with torture, imprisonment, and even being burned at the stake, so let's just say he got off easy compared to those other punishments. It wasn't until 350 years later did the church be like, okay, yes, we agree, Galileo was onto something.
Fellow elites, now that we've made travel so expensive, this world-famous resort is one of the least crowded places on Earth. No one could afford to...
Moving on to number 8, we have cutting funding. For years, the church gave thousands of dollars to a non-profit organization, Compañeros, that would help Hispanic immigrants get access to healthcare, among other things. That was until they found out that Compañeros supported a gay and lesbian rights group. So the church cut the funding to this company for their connection to the LGBTQ2S+ community. They're not the only group that the church has done this to, though. No, apparently, and I quote, since 2010, 9 groups from across the country have lost financing from the campaign because of conflicts with Catholic principles. Moving on to number 7, we have the gay clergy member. In 2018, a secret Catholic group came forward claiming they had information all about their clergy member, Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell. They claimed that he was using the gay male dating app Grindr and would visit gay bars weekly. Now, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being gay. What's wrong is shaming this poor man and outing him, and the poor man had to resign. Obviously, this is something the Catholic Church doesn't want us to know. Why? Because they say homosexual acts is immoral and contrary to the natural law. They also say homosexual tendencies are objectively disordered. And they also preach celibacy. So having a clergy member that is gay is highly controversial for them, and they tried to hide it. A lot of Catholics were outraged when word got out. Scariest part is how they found out about Jeffrey in the first place. Apparently the group was tracking his movements based on the apps he was using. Pretty terrifying and also very, very wrong. Moving on to number 6, we have Joan of Arc. Turns out that the church wasn't the biggest fan of Joan of Arc. In fact, at one point she was pretty much the Catholic Church's #1 public enemy. Long story short, she believed that God was speaking to her and had told her to start an uprising to get the English out of France. By doing so, she pissed off some high-powered Catholics who wanted her gone. So they decided to put her up for trial. But legit, they had no evidence against her, but they were like, whatever, fake it till you make it, right? So they just accused her of heresy with no evidence, cause it was a lie. And on top of that, they denied her counsel, which was against the church's rules. They just hated her and wanted to get rid of her. I think there were like 70+ charges brought up against her. One of them being for wearing men's clothing, in which she was burned at the stake for. In 1431, in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they lit her on fire for wearing male clothing. But it was discovered after her death that she never even did this. Literally, they killed an innocent woman. Why? Because they were probably intimidated by her. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the slaying of women. Pope Innocent VII wasn't innocent at all. In fact, he was terrified of witches. He said that they were real and a huge threat. So he created a huge witch hunt. He dispatched his men to Germany to try witches. And due to the pressure he put on them, countless innocent women were killed after being accused of being witches. All because Pope Innocent was paranoid as hell. Not only that, but in 1487 a book was written all about these witches. It said that this book promoted burning them at the stake, and that influenced a number of killings. Plus, the book was just filled with lies, like saying these women would stop cows from producing milk and would ride on broomsticks in the air. It's just truly messed up and spread misinformation and paranoia. In our 4th spot, we have the burning of the dead. Apparently, the church holds grudges because 43 years after John Wycliffe passed away, They had his body dug up and burned. Now, let me explain how it got to this point. So, John saw fault in the Roman Catholic Church and saw how it was corrupt. So he believed that people should worship God and Jesus according to the Bible, not according to the popes and their bishops and priests, because people are corrupt. But the Bible is not. He also believed that people should interpret the Bible for themselves and not how other people tell them to interpret it. Well, the church did not like this at all. So when he passed away, they ordered all his books to be burned. They also ordered for his body to be unburied. And for some reason, it took them years to get this all done. So 43 years later, his body was finally unburied and then torched, and then his ashes were just thrown into the river. In our third spot, we have the misuse of power. Just this year, it was discovered that the French clergy had taken advantage of over 200,000 young individuals since the 1950s. It is absolutely disgusting. The height of this happened between the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when most of the cases were discovered. Then there was a resurgence of cases in the early 1990s. And obviously the Catholic Church doesn't want anyone to know about this. In fact, it's obvious that the church was turning a blind eye to the perpetrators. They were more focused on protecting themselves and their reputation. They did not care for the victims at all. A report said, and I quote, "The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse." Like I said, it's absolutely disgusting. Moving on to number 2, we have the number of priests. In January of 2002, it was discovered that 234 priests have had allegations of sexual misconduct made against them in the last 50 years. You heard me. 234. That just makes me sick to my stomach. These individuals are using their title and control to take advantage of others. Some of the victims did file lawsuits against a number of dioceses and got multiple $million-dollar settlements in some cases. But that still does not take away their trauma and their PTSD. Even though the Catholic Church held a worldwide summit to talk about all this, it wasn't that effective, as priests were still caught taking advantage of individuals years later. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Inquisitions. It should not be forgotten that the Catholic Church would routinely arrest and torture Jews, Muslims, along with other individuals of different religions. They literally were like, convert to our beliefs or be executed. It's your choice. They were given a warning. They were told to vacate the area, and the people that stayed were arrested and then either forced to convert or be executed. Sometimes they even tortured them before execution. They used branding, would hang them from their thumbs or toes, and would break their bones. After that, that's when they were strangled and then burned at the stake.
Starting us off at number 10, modern day exorcisms. I think it's safe to say that most of us, at least me, assumed that the real life practice of exorcisms was a purely ancient and outdated ritual. Well, you might be surprised to learn that the Vatican has been known to perform them as recently as 2009. Not only that, but there is apparently a formal school inside the Vatican, and in 2018, 250 priests from all over the world attended the annual course. To make matters even more interesting, up until his death in 2016, there was a chief exorcist in the Vatican who claims to have performed a mind-boggling 130,000 exorcisms in his time. But it wasn't just him that performed them. Oh, no. The Pope themselves have been known to get their hands dirty. When in 2009, Pope Benedict allegedly slammed Satan out of 2 men. And apparently in 2000, Pope John Paul II attempted one as well, but was unsuccessful, and later Father Ameth, the chief exorcist at the time, witnessed the possessed woman crawling up the walls like a spider. Next up, at number 9, the secret archives. Apparently within the Vatican lies a room coined the secret archives, containing all the documents the church has collected throughout the centuries. But just what exactly is written on these documents? Well, that is the one secret that will be tricky to get the answer to. While it's not entirely impossible to get access to these documents, they are extremely confidential and only a select few can see. But even then, it's not a free-for-all rummage. you must tell them what you are there to see, and you will receive only those documents to reference. I don't know about you, but it seems very odd that they're keeping whatever is in that room a secret. I mean, what is it that they don't want us to know? Next up at number 8, tax evasion. It's pretty common knowledge that most churches around the world are tax exempt, and the Vatican is no different. Well, except for the scale. The Vatican receives a property tax break for all non-commercial properties containing a chapel. They've managed to figure out how to use this to their advantage, and between the years of 2006 to 2011, the Vatican evaded taxes that amounted to 4 billion euros. Like, think about how much money that is. Truly, it's staggering. But before you grab your picket signs and march down there yourselves, there was some justice. Thankfully, the European Court of Justice stepped in and ruled this completely illegal and forced the Vatican to cough up the cash as post-dated tax. But many argue that it wasn't enough. If you look back at accounts dating back to 1992, it's estimated that the Vatican has evaded nearly 13 billion euros, and that's just in the last 30 years. I don't even want to know how high that number could go if we dug even deeper. Next up at number 7, bank dealings with the infamous World War II leader. The Vatican is a sovereign state, meaning essentially that they have legitimate and independent authority over their specific territory, even though the city resides within the borders of Rome. So, a part of this is that the Vatican has their own bank called the Institute for the Works of Religion, or IOR. But truthfully, the term bank is a bit of a stretch. Now, it's not the existence of the IOR that they don't want you to know about. But who they have dealt with financially. Apparently, during World War II, the Vatican received a considerable church tax from Germany's leader annually. The tax was paid via the IOR so that it couldn't be easily traced by Western banks. And through these dealings, the IOR became recognized as the world's top offshore bank. Now, we know the church stored billions of dollars in this account, but the full extent was never revealed to the public, so we will never know just how much the church actually ended making off of those evil fascists. Next up at number 6, top secret court. Back in 1179, Pope Alexander created a secret court to handle sins of crimes based on conscience. The top secret court was a secret to the public up until 2009, but has been known to judge events on a wide spectrum, such as desecrating a communion wafer to priests breaking their vows of celibacy. Now, apparently the sinner who seeks absolution must write an anonymous petition to the Holy See, which is essentially the government of the Roman Catholic Church, which will then be submitted to the tribunal, which is kind of like a board that rules for the court. The tribunal will consider the matter, but the ultimate decision lies in the hands of the major penitentiary, who is the highest ranking archbishop, and it is only if he cannot come to a decision that is then passed along to the Pope. Allegedly, up until the 18th century, crimes of SA and murder were judged by this tribunal. Next up at number 5, post-war smuggling. Not only did the Vatican manage to make money off of the German war criminals for several years, but when all was said and done, they actually helped them escape the mess they had made. Understandably, after the war ended, Europe was not a big fan of the select German citizens that had caused an entire world war, so their solution was to flee the country and head towards South America. They apparently fled Europe using routes known as rat lines, and the Vatican knowingly gave them a helping hand. According to a researcher at Harvard, Gerald Steinecker, the Vatican's aid was based on the revival of European Christianity and the fear of the Soviet Union. And while that may be true, it's still incredibly hard to believe that someone actually pitied these people and helped them escape. To add insult to injury, the Vatican was often behind creating the false identities for the escapees prior to helping them flee. Next up at number 4, Pope John VIII. Now, if you don't know, according to the Catholic Church, the Pope must be a man. No exceptions. It is one rule they have never broken. Or have they? As the story goes, many years ago, Pope John VIII was elected, but as it turns out, it was more of a Pope Joan situation. She traveled from Athens and through a series of dares, found herself elected as the Pope. But after becoming pregnant, she gave birth in the middle of the road, ruining her cover, and was dragged for miles by a horse until she died. By the time they found out, she had already reigned for 2 years, and incredibly embarrassed, they covered up the entire affair so as not to tarnish their reputation. The alleged Pope Joan was very intelligent and proficient in law, theology, and philosophy, and managed to disguise herself with no one the wiser for 2 years, which is an incredible feat, especially in her time. Next up at number 3, dead man on trial. Back in 897, the Catholic Church actually put a dead man on trial. The trial was for the deceased Pope Formosus, and his successor, Pope Stephen VI, held it, accusing him of usurping the papacy. He had already been dead 7 months by the time he was put on trial, but nonetheless, they wanted to go through with it. They even assigned someone to speak on his behalf. Unsurprisingly, the dead man was found guilty, and all of his acts as Pope were declared null and void. His body was stripped of his sacred garments, and they cut off his 3 fingers of benediction. From there, he was cast into the river, the place where all the infamous criminals were disposed of for centuries. Coming in at number 2, Duplessis orphans. Flashback to 1940s and 1950s Quebec. Maurice Duplessis was the premier of Quebec at the time, and many of the social services were provided by the Roman Catholic Church. Now, because of the Catholic Church's belief that women needed to be married to have children, they would frequently urge mothers to give up their children to orphanages, as they felt that the mothers were incapable of caring for them without husbands. Now, it gets sticky because not only is that just crazy, but many of these orphanages were operated by the church. Now, here is where Maurice Duplessis comes in. He discovered that he could get more money from the government if he declared the orphans mentally ill or unstable. Regular orphans would get him $1.25 a day, but psychiatric patients would get $2.75 a day. So under Duplessis, the provincial government deliberately misdiagnosed thousands of children for fiscal gain. These children were tested and abused and traumatized, all so the government could make money off of them. And don't forget, the Catholic Church owned these orphanages, so they too made money off of it. And coming in our number 1 spot, the Vatileaks. Back in 2012, an author named Gianluigi Nuzzi published a book entitled His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI, which contained confidential letters and memorandums from within the Vatican walls. How did he get all of this info? Well, the butler, of course. Paolo Gabriele, who had been the Pope's personal butler since 2007, aided the author by leaking highly classified information, for which he was later arrested by Vatican police in 2013. Now, with these documents leaked, authorities reviewed them and held an investigation to dive deeper into the scandal. It was uncovered that members from outside the Vatican were blackmailing secretly gay bishops, as the bishops were sleeping with them and not only breaking their vows of celibacy, but also hiding that they were homosexual, which, if you are unaware, is kind of a huge deal in the Catholic Church. With all the scandal of leaked documents, gay bishops, backstabbing butlers, the Pope eventually resigned in 2013, and the rest is history.
In our number 10 spot, we have Robin Coulin. Okay, this is a mysterious one to me. Robin Coulin was an astronaut in training at NASA and was in a special 2-year program. He outbeat 18,300 applicants and had many years of schooling and expertise to do so. So hence the reason it was such a shock for the world to learn that he just quit after a little more than a year. According to a NASA spokesperson, it was for personal reasons. Look, I've seen the movies. More than likely, knowing that NASA doesn't have a high turnover rate, Robin more than likely did not quit NASA for personal reasons. We need to get the internet detectives on this case. Did he find out a secret that disturbed him so much that he had to quit? Did he discover that they are really keeping aliens at Area 51? Who knows? My vote is for the latter. Coming up at our number 9 spot, we have Mayday. Not specifically NASA, but an interesting story to note from another very awesome astronaut. You may not know this, but South Korea had its very first astronaut go to space in 2008, and it was a very big deal for them. Astronaut Yi So-yin was South Korea's first and only astronaut to quit her job, but for, in my opinion, a very good reason. While on her journey home from space, she was going to find out that it would be far from smooth. She discovered that she was veering off course, which, as you can imagine, was completely scary, even though spaceships tend to be slightly off course most of the time. But in any case, they did land safely. Hooray, but they landed 260 miles off course near some shepherds in Kazakhstan. The people of the village thought that they were aliens. Even though she made history, she eventually ended up quitting and decided to go back to school in California. Imagine going out into space and then coming home and deciding to do something else. Damn, that's a life lived. In our number 8 spot, we have black holes. Black holes are fascinating. If you haven't heard of a black hole before, well, just know that they are some of the strangest and most fascinating objects in space. They're, quote, extremely dense with such a strong gravitational attraction that not even light can escape their grasp. Apparently, the Milky Way could contain over 100 million black holes, and that was where one of the first black holes was discovered in 1964. It was called Cygnus X1. NASA and Space.com have reported that, quote, astronomers saw the first signs of the black hole when a sounding rocket detected celestial sources of X-rays. In 1971, astronomers determined that the X-rays were coming from a bright blue star orbiting a strange dark object. It was suggested that the detected X-rays were a result of stellar material being stripped away from the bright star and gobbled up by the dark object, an all-consuming black hole. Yeah, that's not terrifying. I would probs quit after learning about this. In our number 7 spot, we have aliens. There has been an increasing amount of aerial phenomena, as NASA puts it, otherwise known as UFOs, in the last while. And so NASA has actually announced the assemblage of a team of scientists that will be examining this phenomena. Hooray! NASA said the focus will be on identifying available data, which is the best way to gather future data, and how it can use this information to advance scientific understanding of the issue. The chief of NASA's science unit, Thomas Zurbuchen, has said, quote, we're looking at the Earth in new ways, and we're also looking the other way, at the sky, in new ways. What we're really trying to do here is start an investigation without an outcome in mind. Well, at least they finally admit to aliens possibly existing, and all the conspiracy theorists of the world can say to the people that downplayed all of the evidence, told ya. In our number 6 spot, we have space music. This is allegedly from the Apollo 10 mission to space. The astronauts were checking out various equipment to see what would work in space. Of course, the stakes were high because they were actually in space, and who knows if the equipment might blow up or whatnot. But apparently, when they put on headphones connected to a speaker they were testing, they heard a strange whistling sound. They were so amused and a little unsettled by this strange music that they later called it space music. In our number 5 spot, we have the Space Fire. Apparently, astronaut Jerry Leininger, who was stationed on the Mir space station, was just having his dinner when suddenly he discovered an extra tank of oxygen-based chemicals catch fire. Leininger said, quote, it was a hot, hot, hot fire burning out of control. Apparently the fire was blocking one of the Soyuz ships that the team would have had to board in order to evacuate. So had they not put the fire out, somebody would have been left behind. Yikes, well that's a little unsettling. Thankfully, they did. In our number 4 spot, we have the floating animal corpses. The thought of this is literally horrific, as I am obsessed with animals and refuse to kill even an ant. But hearing this isn't that surprising, as apparently the first living things sent to space were a monkey and a dog. Those poor babies probably had no idea what was happening until they eventually starved to death, which is just sad. Anyways, hearing this shouldn't then surprise you to hear that the corpse of the dog and monkey can be seen floating in space. Imagine seeing that and then having to go on doing what you're doing. God. My heart hurts. Yeah, if it wasn't already obvious that I'll never be an astronaut, well, I definitely won't be one now, knowing that I may have to stumble across this. In our number 3 spot, we have shiny objects. This story is slightly unsettling, but also kind of makes you excited for future astronaut discoveries. Apparently, one of NASA's astronauts by the name of Alan Bean has claimed that he saw a really shiny object on the moon. When he was asked to describe it, he said that it looked like shoe leather. You usually would assume that anything from outer space is gray or black, so to hear that there's something shiny just hanging out on the moon is so interesting. It reminds me of that kid's book where that one fish was really sparkly, the rainbow fish. Loved that book. They were never able to learn anything more, but could this be the moon's version of a diamond? Probably. In our number 2 spot, we have They're Watching Us. Allegedly, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon in 1969, it is said that NASA lost transmission for about 2 minutes. Apparently, during those 2 minutes, there was a secret message to NASA that said, "Those babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh God, you won't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Whoa. Okay, well, I am now a believer in the fact that I'm sure they did not lose transmission, and I'm sure NASA only said that so that the general employees and people watching could not hear what needed to be said. Finally, in our number 1 spot, we have a fleet of UFOs. Apparently, astronaut Gordon Cooper witnessed the most crazy thing in human history, in my opinion. Proof that our future could potentially be Star Wars in real life. He saw a fleet of UFOs. That's right. He claims to have seen it around the time he flew the Air Force. What's wild is that about 10 years later, he'd bear witness to another UFO. Also the luckiest man in history. Allegedly, in 1963, a UFO flew towards him. Apparently, it was picked up on a radar too, which confirms the proof of existence and Gordon's story. Whoa. Fun fact. I once saw a floating light in the sky, and then I saw it literally zoom away at lightning speed, not lying, so I'm pretty sure I also have seen a UFO.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have space snakes. Dr. Musgrave is a trustworthy man, or at least his credentials suggest he must be. Not only is he a NASA astronaut, he has 6 degrees, and he's a doctor and a mathematician. He has made 6 space flights, and he believes that there is life out there. In 1994, he said, "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there." What? It's not just a wee little space snake either. He said that it was 6, 7, or 8 feet long. He said that the snake followed him around for a long period of time and he tried to communicate with it. Space snakes, honestly. Dr. Musgrave thinks that they must have their own propulsion technique, which honestly is just baffling and is a can of worms or snakes. Coming in at number 9, we have asteroids. Astronaut Chris Hadfield conducted a Reddit AMA and he discussed something that scared him. He said, "Sometimes we hear pings as tiny rocks hit our spaceship, and also the creaks and snaps of expanding metal as we go in and out of sunlight. The solar panels are filled with tiny holes from micrometeorites." Honestly, that really terrifies me as a person who's like a bit scared of flying in an aeroplane. This would deeply stress me out. He also said, "I watched a large meteorite burn up between me and Australia, and to think of that hypersonic dumb lump of rock randomly hurtling into us instead sent a shiver up my back." Like, I'll say Chris, mate, Jesus. Coming into number 8, we have the formation. Gordon Cooper, the last American to spend time in space alone, has had a couple of very strange experiences in the skies. The first happened when he was a member of the Air Force. He was flying with other pilots in 1951 when he saw, I quote, "a vast armada of UFOs flying in formation at extremely high altitudes." I'm sorry, but vast armada, that is terrifying. Not just one curious UFO, a whole fleet. On top of that, in 1963, Cooper was shot into space aboard a Mercury capsule to circumnavigate the world. As he was passing Perth, he noticed a fast-flying green object that was also picked up by Australian tracking systems. Now, the press were briefed that they were not allowed to talk to him about this. Why? Like, seriously, why? Coming into number 7, we have the check mark. American astronaut Leroy Chiao was the commander of the International Space Station in 2005. During his time up there, he saw some extremely weird things. He explained his encounter to the Huffington Post by saying, "I saw some lights that seemed to be in a line, and it was almost like an upside-down check mark, and I saw them fly by, and I thought it was awfully strange." Could this have been the formation that Cooper was talking about? Some skeptics even tried to pass the lights off as far off fishing boat lights from Earth, but to be honest, I'm skeptical of those skeptics. Coming in at number 6, we have magnificent desolation. What is it like on the moon? Utterly terrifying according to
Camping World's garage sale is back. Join us on site for the biggest savings event of the year. Don't miss out on our incredible deals with aged and wholesale RVs starting as low as $3,500 and up to 70% off RV and outdoor accessories. We'll see you there.
Famous YouTuber Mr. Beast is setting a new world record for the largest iPhone giveaway ever. He is giving away 10,000 brand new iPhone 15 Pros with a total worth of more than $10 million. "Gifting people is my passion," said Mr. Beast in a statement after announcing the giveaway. This comes as no surprise after gifting money and luxury cars grew his YouTube channel to more than 200.
Buzz Aldrin. Buzz, as we know, was the second man on the moon. Yes, televised recordings of the moon can be seen, and yes, we have high-res photographs, but truly knowing what it feels like to be up there is something only a handful of people can talk to us about. In a Reddit AMA, Buzz Aldrin describes his experience. He said, "My first words of my impression of being on the surface of the moon that just came to my mind are magnificent desolation." He continued by saying, "There is no place on Earth as desolate as what I was viewing in those first few moments on the lunar surface. Beyond me, I could see the moon curving away, no atmosphere, black sky, cold, colder than anyone could experience on Earth when the sun is up." While that sounds totally incredible, it also sounds like the beginnings of a total existential breakdown. Coming into number 5, we have the spheres. In 1981, following the Saljut mission, the USSR cosmonaut Major General Vladimir Kolvyanok gave a press conference in which he shared some very interesting information. He said that he looked out of a porthole and saw something he simply couldn't explain, something impossible to the laws of physics. He described the object he saw as spherical and elliptical, saying that it exploded into a beautiful golden light. After that, he saw 2 more spheres and a white smoke sphere cloud. Then, as they flew through the Terminator, the name for the zone between light and day, he lost sight of them. Honestly, how fascinating and terrifying at the very same time. To me, it's also weird and interesting how Russia appears to be more forthcoming in discussing things that they've seen in space, whereas the United States are keen to keep a lid on it. Why do you think the United States are so heavily guarded on what they'll say about what they've seen in space? Honestly, I don't know. Coming into number 4, we have the knocking. In 2003, Yang Liwei was the first Chinese astronaut to be propelled into space. Now, I understand the loneliness of space might send you a little bit mad, but he said one night that he heard a strange and continuous knocking. He said, and I quote, "Someone was knocking on the body of the spaceship, just as knocking an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. It neither came from outside nor inside the spaceship." I'm sorry, but honestly, what? Isn't that some of the creepiest space descriptions that you've ever heard? It seems he wasn't the last to hear it either. 2 further astronauts heard the same space knocks when they went up there. What are these? Coming into number 3, we have the music. Listening to the transcript of the words said on board Apollo 10 is bone-chilling. The spaceship passed by the dark side of the moon, and as it did, the astronauts heard a very weird ethereal music. This is what was said between Eugene Cernan, Thomas Stafford, and John Young. That music sounds out of spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that whistling sound? Yes. Boy, that sure is weird music. We're gonna have to find out about that. Nobody will believe us. Later, Cernan said that eerie music is what's bothering me. You know what? I hear it too. Who is going to believe it? Nobody. Should we tell them about it? I don't know, I think we ought to think about it some. It seems that the Apollo 11 crew heard it too. What was it? We don't really know. Coming into number 2, we have heat is rising in the capsule. So this is really sad and really disturbing, so do skip forward if you aren't ready for something truly terrifying. In 1967, Russian cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov did not make it back to Earth alive, something he suspected would happen when he agreed to be the solo pilot of the Soyuz 1. His spacecraft malfunctioned and he was quite aware he was going to die. Some of the last things he said can't be translated into words. He was screaming and crying words of anger. Among the last words that can be deciphered are, "The heat is rising in the capsule and you've killed me." Honestly, that makes me so sad. Finally, coming into number 1, we have "They're watching us." Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, had something very scary to say when he arrived at the moon in the Apollo 11 mission. It was something he spoke about once but never spoke about again. In a secret transmission to NASA, according to the retired chief of communications system Maurice Chatelain, the first man on the moon's first words were actually, "Oh God, you won't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Now this wasn't heard by the world as the broadcast was dropped for 2 minutes. Armstrong never spoke about it again, although a lot of credible sources have confirmed that this is what he said.
Number 10, a car crash. Let's start with the drama here. Pretty sure if you say you're an astronaut, people are going to look at you differently. In a good way. Man, you've been to space. After all, you are a human being who has seen just how small the world is compared to the wide, wide universe. Many revere James Donald Halsell Jr. after the 5 space shuttle missions he took before retiring in 2006. But he must have hit the ground hard when he came down to Earth. Halsell was traveling in his car to West Monroe, Louisiana, and stopped at a Motel 6. While there, he downed 3 glasses of wine before heading back on the road, which is a no-no. Therefore, tragedy struck. James crashed into a car, killing 2 of the young passengers in the vehicle who flew from the car when they crashed. He was going extremely fast and reportedly tried to steal a bystander's car when he stopped at the site. James told police that he didn't remember leaving the hotel or how the crash occurred. Though they found no drugs at the scene, police did find 10 empty sleeping pill packages back at the room. NASA declined to comment about the arrest. Very, very sad. Number 9, a love triangle. This one? Oh my god. This next one is pretty rough. We all know what it's like to go through a breakup. It's not fun. It sucks. It doesn't necessarily bring out the best in you. Mother of 3 and mission flight engineer as well as crew member on the 13-day shuttle mission, Lisa Nowak was a prominent figure in NASA's astronaut team. She was even the inspiration for Natalie Portman in the film Lucy in the Sky before she went all breakup song on her ex. In February 2007, Lisa drove from Houston to Orlando, Florida, wearing diapers, so she didn't have to stop, to confront the woman who she claims stole her man. She claimed she was going to have a calm conversation, but instead she ended up attacking her. She was in a wig and a trench coat and there was pepper spray. It was a whole ordeal. William O'Fallon and Nowak trained together and began an affair in 2004. Both divorced their partners, with Nowak thinking her future was with William. Wrong. Williams started exclusively dating Air Force Captain Colleen Shipman, and he thought Nowak took it well when he told her. Instead, she ended up sneaking into his apartment, read their email exchanges, and well, Flash forward to a 900-mile drive, pepper spray, and nightmares Shipman will have for the rest of her life. Initially arrested on the attempted murder charges, they were dropped to less aggressive accusations like attempted burglary and kidnapping. Shipman and Bill are now married, while Nowak, after years of counseling, is doing much better, though she refuses to talk about the event for obvious reasons. I hope you're doing better. Number 8, married to his work. NASA ended up wanting so little to do with this guy that they actually fired him. Today, divorce is about as common as breakups in high school. Though some happy news, it looks like the percentage is going down, but in the 60s, getting divorced was a major taboo. NASA's astronauts were about the closest thing to comic book heroes the world had ever seen, and they knew that public opinion was a huge part of their funding. So, when an astronaut hero misbehaved, NASA wasn't going to stand for it. Don Easel wasn't exactly a faithful husband, and he rarely visited his son, who was dying of leukemia. He also cheated on his wife multiple times at Cape Canaveral, which was flooded with eager groupies. He gaslighted his wife several times when she asked him to admit it, and when she suggested going to therapy if he thought she was crazy, he replied, "But I'll lose my job." Dawn and Harriet at last divorced, and NASA soon followed, firing Dawn as well.
Bye, Dawn.
See you later. Number 7, the Astronauts' Wives Club. Not a fun time. Speaking of astronauts behaving badly, let's talk about the reports of the Astronauts' Wives Club. These lovely ladies were used to a measly military pay when suddenly they became celebrities overnight, and given the aforementioned squeaky clean image NASA wanted to protect, any scandal was swept under the rug. According to the Astronauts' Wives Club, a true story by Lily Copel. On the outside, they were the ideal Stepford wives, apple pie baking, apron wearing beauties. But out of the 30 astronaut marriages from 1961 to 69, only 7 would stay married. The biggest wedge in the marriage was the time the men spent at Florida's Cape Canaveral, which I previously mentioned, which became off-limits playground. Cape Cookies became the name of the women who would magically appear to have their own rockets launched by the men who would touch the stars. To handle the silence and stress, the wives turned to excessive ways to self-medicate, the nightly gin and tonic with a tranquilizer garnish. Yeah. Pretty rough. Number 6, fireflies. Ice particles, they said. Part of the capsule heat shield, they said. Could it have been that John Glenn saw something else instead? Glenn was the first American astronaut to orbit the planet in 1962. He was also one of the good ones. He and his wife Annie were married for 73 years. In fact, when he left to fight in World War II, he told her, and I quote, "I'm just going down to the corner store to get a pack of gum," to which she replied, "Don't be long." He said that every time he went away to war. She kept a gum wrapper in her purse every time after that. Anyways, grab a tissue, that's super cute, let's continue. Glenn, while flying over Australia, saw strange floating mass like tiny little stars outside the Friendship 7 capsule. When he tapped on the window, they flew off. Mission Control were at first concerned the anomalies were fragments of the heat shield, but that wasn't the case. No, it was something else. NASA has since explained the sighting as ice particles, but up until his death in 2016, Glenn never really believed it. His wife Annie finally joined him at peace, passing away due to COVID complications at the age of 100 in May 2020. Number 5, space music. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the first song played in space was Jingle Bells on the 16th of December 1965. It was broadcasted during NASA's Gemini GA spaceflight. Though there have been several musicians played out there in the big space.
Yo, which My Hero game
there
you
remains
playing?
an artist unknown. Eugene Cernan in the Apollo 10 space capsule reported hearing a strange kind of music during a mission. What he described as a strange musical whistling sound, like how you would imagine space music to be, like the... I can't do it. Just imagine very sci-fi. He reached out to NASA Mission Control to see if they'd heard it too. According to the mission transcripts released in 2008, the sounds were recorded. Of course, alien theories have spread far and wide, but NASA made no comment. Then, in the Apollo 11, Michael Collins recorded hearing the same sound while orbiting the moon. This time, NASA was prepared. They said it was, and I quote, "interference between the LMs and command modules VHS radios," unquote. Sure it was NASA. Sure.
Quote unquote.
Number
Sure the
4,
fuck it was
Lights and
NASA.
beyond. It might surprise you to learn that not only do we have a ton of garbage down here on Earth, but a ton of
NASA
space
stand
junk
for niggas
sits
always saying
just above
anything.
us. In fact, the estimate for just how much is staggering. Around 128 million pieces, about 6,000 tons of space debris in space. Earth's low orbit carries millions of rocket and spacecraft fragments along with dead satellites. Each one is flying around 18,000 miles per hour, so faster than a bullet? Yeah. So the likelihood of astronauts encountering space debris is pretty high, but this one example is pretty staggering. But that doesn't stop this case from being very strange. Brent Jet was in the STS-150 mission in 2006.
Let me tell you why the law of attraction does not work for most people. Now, to manifest anything, you must ask, then receive, right? But let's face it, if it were that easy, everyone would be a millionaire because everyone wishes that. So, does this mean that the law of attraction is a lie? Absolutely not. The reason why
on his way to help
see,
construct the ISS.
I'm glad I got
Then
both
he
y'all
noticed
on here
that,
at the
I
same
quote,
time
some
too.
kind
Yo,
of reflective
Damari, you still
structure,
here?
unquote,
Tay, you still
outside
here?
the
Let
shuttle.
me know
According
in the
to
comment.
him, quote, it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen outside of this shuttle, that's for sure, unquote. NASA took control of the camera and there were 3 bright objects in the sky. When they ordered an inspection of the craft, they saw nothing. Not even a hint. Space junk? Or aliens. NASA has no explanation and they won't talk about it, so what is it? And heading on to our top 3, number 3, the Gordo UFO. I suppose it's not too hard to guess that Major Gordo Cooper was a lover of all things space, but it turns out that his adoration goes deeper than that. In 1957, 30-year-old Cooper was test pilot and project manager of the fighter section of the Experimental Flight Test Engineering Division at Edwards AFB in California. 2 members of his crew one morning mentioned to him that they caught sight of a strange saucer-like object. It apparently didn't make a sound as it landed and took off. The 2 men took photos of the craft and Cooper was ordered to have the film developed, have no prints made, and send it right away to the Pentagon. He was also instructed not to look, but like of course he did. He saw exactly what the 2 men described and to his very deathbed insisted the government was covering it up. But not only that, on his 1963 solo trip, he had a close encounter that was broadcasted on NBC. He saw a glowing green object approaching and it was picked up on radar. But when he got to Earth, he wasn't allowed to talk about it. Number 2, edits in space. Could NASA be editing the footage sent down from the International Space Station? This theory is hot among conspiracists. The idea really started to gain traction in July 2016. 2 different cameras 25 hours apart spotted a distinct square shape, larger than the Earth. Initially, UFO hunters concluded that it had to be some kind of unidentified object in our orbit,
right?
but another
I
theory
was thinking
surfaced
too when
that
I
the
like
shapes
and
were
like mainly
actually
it's just
attempts
for
by
us. Like
NASA
I don't
to
care
edit
about
something
building
else
the
out.
Twitch or
Could it
anything
be
or the shows
mirrors
up or any
or
of
a
that, but
cover-up of
I
something
want to
NASA
start
has
doing
determined
like
we're
classes
not
for
ready
us,
to
like
see
me,
yet.
you,
NASA was
Damari,
forced to
like
deny
our
that they
family. You get what I'm
didn't
talking
attempt
about,
to
so that
cover
we
up,
could help
but
build our
UFO
finance.
hunters will
Like
never rest
I'm
until the
gonna
truth
do
is
the call
revealed,
outs, the
even
crypto,
if it has
everything,
been
like
already,
especially
so we
like
don't really know what's true.
throughout the
And
days of the
last
week.
but not
I'm gonna
least,
throw the live
the
on and it's gonna be
Reich
that.
and
You feel me?
NASA.
And then we
Well,
just gonna
this
study and
is
learn.
a surprising little tidbit, but honestly,
We're just gonna
I'm
study
not
and
too
learn, but
surprised.
together, you
This
feel me?
is
Because it's
definitely
always
worthy of
different
being
and it
number one,
hit better
especially
when we
since
like
NASA
when niggas
doesn't
do shit together. You
advertise
feel me?
it really at all. During World War II, the
Put
U.S.
this shit up here.
recruited the help
I
of
got
over
mad different
1,600
PDFs with knowledge
German
for us.
Yahtzee
You get what I'm saying,
scientists.
bro? Like we
Yes,
can
I
start
said
really studying the
Yahtzee
charts
because apparently
together.
YouTube gets
Really take
scared.
this
They are
this
Death Eaters.
generational
Anyways, they
wealth, this
hired over
finance shit to another
1,600
level,
German
beloved. Like
Yahtzee
it's the
scientists
perfect
in
time for
institutes
that
like
shit, bro. We might
NASA
as
to
well
increase their
utilize this shit
payroll.
for the
The
right,
code
like
name
you
for
feel me?
this
Like for the
operation
right
was
reasons, the right
Operation
way.
Paperclip because of all the paperclips on the immigration files, which brought in Werner von Braun and his V2 rocket team. The former SS officer would become a U.S. citizen and was a key architect in the Apollo program. What? In 1977, he was awarded the National Medal of Science despite having previously hand-picked slave laborers in Buchenwald for his rocket-building efforts. Yeah, so that's special.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Fireflies. In February 1962, John Glenn noticed something strange outside the window while aboard the Friendship 7 spacecraft. He noticed strange glowing
and it's like it makes no
particles
sense for us
floating
all
in
not to
space
be on the same
nearby
page
that
with it, you
looked
feel
like
me? Like think about it, we got
He
massive
radioed down
cousins
Mission
and brothers and all this
Control
other
saying, "This
shit.
is Friendship
Now, I
7.
mean,
I'll
it's
try
like
to
there's no
describe
reason
what
why
I'm
we
in
ain't
here. I'm in a big mass of some very small particles that are brilliantly lit up like they're luminescent. I never saw anything like it. They're round a little, they're coming by the capsule and they look like little stars, a whole shower of them coming by. They swirl around the capsule and go in front of the window, and they're all brilliantly lighted. They probably average maybe 7 or 8 feet apart, but I can see them all down below me also. John then went on to say that they were moving very slowly and almost seemed to be matching his current speed. After a thorough investigation, NASA scientists deduced that the lights were probably frost flakes that were being lit up as they fell away from the craft. They admitted that that does kind of make them look like fireflies. Of course, there are still people out there online
and we could fuck around and work out together too.
First contact with some sort of glowing space bugs. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Glass Dome. Richard Hoagland is an author who wrote a conspiracy theory book about the Apollo missions called Dark Mission. Now in it, he claims that ancient builders constructed enormous domes enclosing huge areas of the moon's surface. They would have had water and air inside them at one point. He claims there are actually hidden lunar cities that appear blurred and distorted because they're being viewed through this glass. Of course, the next question is, where is he getting all this from? Well, he points out that Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean said that on that mission, space seen from the lunar surface was black but shiny as if it was being viewed through glass. Of course, Hoagland used this as proof of his glass dome theory, saying space should be velvet black, it should be inky black, it should be infinity, unending, deep, endless black, it shouldn't be shiny. This is something that Alan Bean has denied and does not claim himself, but the story has gained traction among some conspiracy theory groups. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Musa Manarov. That's the name of this former cosmonaut who is known for spending 541 consecutive days in space. It's safe to say he was an experienced cosmonaut who received numerous awards and honors. In all those years, he never reported anything too out of the ordinary, except for one time in 1991. That year, Manarov was on a mission to the Mir space station and was filming a visiting space capsule dock nearby. He filmed its approach. As he filmed its approach, he saw an object that looked like it was coming off the spacecraft. Here's some of that footage so you can see for yourself.
And this by Musa Manarov is the best known one from Russia, I believe.
Okay, I think we can immediately, being out in space here, dismiss the possibility that this is
space is
a rock.
Now whatever that was, it freaked him out and he became convinced he had seen something unusual. He said he knew there was nothing that could come loose at that point during the docking procedure. As he continued to watch the object, it floated downwards and away from the capsule. When this footage began to be shared around the world, some people claimed it was nothing more than space junk, but Manarov said he knows what he saw up there and it was definitely not space junk. Next up at number 7 now guys, we have the dots. In March 2017, UFO hunters claimed they had found proof of aliens in NASA's own footage. The video in question shows astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti demonstrating how to operate window shutters on the ISS. Now as she talks to the camera in the video, we see several white objects coming into view. The UFO community quickly jumped on this and referred to it as the smoking gun. There was no denying a big alien cover-up now. Of course, there's always two sides to the story though. Scott Brando is a man who forensically examines alleged UFO pictures and videos. He gave this video the same treatment and concluded that the lights were either lens reflections or ice particles. Not quite as exciting, but maybe that's the truth. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the organic being.
I've been trying to cap my streams at like 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Leland Melvin tweeted out that he saw something curved and organic looking floating outside of his craft while aboard the space shuttle Atlantis. Naturally, the first thing he did was tell NASA about it, but they said what he was seeing was not extraterrestrial, but just a piece of ice. Now when he shared this story on Twitter, the Twitter account for UFO Sightings Daily asked him if he thought that NASA was lying about that. They believe that his opinion of something looking organic is much more reliable than the opinion of someone on the ground over 400 miles away. Melvin replied that he didn't think so, but you never know. Now some people even thought that Melvin might have made the whole thing up just to, I don't know, entertain people. All of this has left many questions about his story. Ice or organic being? Only Melvin really knows. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the wolves. This is an incredible story, honestly. It's a terrifying account from Russian cosmonaut Alexei Leonov. Now in 1965, he famously performed the first spacewalk ever. It was a success, but it was very nearly a disaster. During the walk, he experienced both air leaks in his suit and material unexpectedly stiffening. This meant he was almost unable to cram himself back inside the capsule. He actually had to lower his own suit pressure and risk getting the bends when he was inside. If that wasn't bad enough, his craft went off course during re-entry and landed in the Ural Mountains, where he and his commander were forced away for rescue as howling wolves began to encircle them. How crazy is that? Next time you guys think you've had a bad day, just spare a thought for Alexei Leonov. Alright, at the number 4 spot now, guys, we have the cryptic message. In 2016, NASA astronaut Scott Kelly gave an interview that conspiracy theorists say contained cryptic messages about seeing aliens in space. In the video, he talked about his 340 days on the International Space Station, and then people say he slipped up and mentioned a cover-up by NASA and the US government. Kelly was asked about his body's response to being in space for so long. He said, and I quote, "Adjusting to space is easier than adjusting to Earth for me. I don't think I ever felt completely normal up there. I think coming back to gravity is harder than leaving gravity, so maybe the aliens got it a lot easier than we do." It was that mentioning of the word alien that sent alarm bells ringing among the conspiracy theorists. He also spoke about a virtual reality game that the astronauts play on the space station, which simulated an alien attack on the space station. Once again, the conspiracy theorists were asking, why would NASA make such a violent game, especially one with such a terrifying scenario? Once again, this is one of those stories where it's NASA's word against people who just don't seem to trust NASA. What do you guys think though? Moving on to number 3 now, we have the flashing lights. This is a very famous set of stories if you're familiar with the moon landings. During the Apollo missions that took astronauts to the moon for the first time, several astronauts reported seeing strange flashing lights. They claimed that these lights flashed in their eyeballs even when their eyes were closed. On one mission, astronaut Charles Duke wore a helmet, closed his eyes, and he still described the light flashes he was seeing to his team. He said they were clusters of white streaks. They happened at the exact same moment that his helmet recorded cosmic rays passing through his helmet and his head. Coincidence? Well, apparently not. NASA confirmed that the astronauts were actually seeing cosmic rays, something we don't see here on Earth because they're all absorbed by our atmosphere. They're so powerful that you can even see them in space with your eyes closed. That's pretty mental. Moving on to the number 2 spot now, we have the floater. On the morning of August 19th, 2013, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy noticed something floating outside of the International Space Station. Here's a little clip so you can see for yourself.
Chris Cassidy had noted an object that was floating past the station near the station Progress 52 cargo ship.
Cassidy noticed this near the Progress cargo vehicle. He called down to Mission Control Houston and took some video of it. Now at first, NASA was just as confused as he was. Was this a UFO? It certainly fit the literal description of an unidentified flying object. After a lot of speculation, NASA said it was an antenna cover from Russia's Zvezda service module. However, many people remain totally unconvinced. They believe that the object is something extraterrestrial, not something of human origin, and that NASA has made up this cover story to avoid public alarm. Personally, as you might know by now, I believe NASA, but what do you guys think? And finally, number 1 now, we have the saucer. This story comes from Donald Slayton, an astronaut during the Mercury missions. He revealed in an interview that he saw UFOs in 1951. He said, "I was testing a P-51 fighter in Minneapolis when I spotted this object. I was at about 10,000 feet on a nice, bright, sunny afternoon. I thought the object was a kite, then I realized that no kite is going to fly that high. As I got closer, it looked like a weather balloon, grey and about 3 feet in diameter, but as soon as I got behind the
bro,
darn
tell
thing,
Mommy and
it
Dominique
didn't look like
to
a balloon anymore. It looked
jump
like
on.
a saucer, a
They
disc.
still didn't
About
even
the same
follow
time,
me on
I
here.
realized
Tell them
that
to
it was
follow and
suddenly
subscribe to my
going
Twitch,
away
bro.
from me. And there I was, running at about 300 miles per hour. I tracked it for a little way, and then all of a sudden sudden the damn thing just took off. It pulled about a 45-degree climbing turn and accelerated and just flat disappeared. An interesting story, and it's of particular interest to UFO enthusiasts because neither Slayton or NASA has provided a rational explanation for this very speedy saucer.
Coming in at number 10 is Vladimir Komarov. Vladimir Komarov was the first astronaut who died directly in space. This was the first mission of the Soviet Soyuz 1 spacecraft on the 23rd of April 1967. Komarov was supposed to test the ship name in manned mode and conduct the world's first docking in space with another Soyuz 2 spacecraft. However, the plan never succeeded and Komarov became the first astronaut lost in space. After the launch of the Soyuz 1 spacecraft into orbit, one of the two solar panels did not open and the spacecraft began to lack electricity for the correct system operations. Komarov tried to open the panel by spinning the ship around its axis, but this did not help. Due to the malfunction, the launch of Soyuz 2 was cancelled and the flight of Soyuz 1 was terminated ahead of schedule. The spacecraft successfully deorbited, but after re-entry for unknown reasons, the parachute system failed. As a result, the descent vehicle hit the ground at a fast speed, which resulted in the astronauts' instant death. As a result, the parachute system was modified and the shortcomings were eliminated. Number 9. Hylian myth. Even though Komarov's death is considered to be the starting point of space travel deaths, there is a myth that he was not the first astronaut lost in space. An American science fiction writer, Robert Hylian, claimed that a similar incident took place even before Gagarin's flight into space. On May 15, 1990, the USSR launched the Vostok 1 1KP prototype into orbit. The goal was to test the altitude control systems and the declaration engine to make sure that the ship was able to go into a descent path on the MCC command. However, the flight ended in failure. 1KP rose to a higher orbit and got stuck there for many years. Allegedly, the ship did not have life support systems, but many believed it was manned. The Western press wrote that the pilot, Gennady Zavadovsky, was on board. Such a person really existed, but at that time he was not part of the Soviet astronaut team, and Hylian claimed that Soviet citizens told him about the astronaut during his visit to USSR. However, I cannot, in all fairness, prove the myth by adding this alleged death to the question of has anyone been lost in space. Number 8. Clifton Williams. Clifton Williams was an American naval aviator, test pilot, mechanical engineer, major in the US Marine Corps, and a NASA astronaut who was killed in a plane crash. To be clear, he never went into space, but this was part of the space program. The crash was caused by a mechanical failure to a NASA T-38 jet trainer, which he was piloting to visit his parents in Mobile, Alabama. The failure caused the flight controls to stop responding, and although he activated the ejection seat, it did not save him. The aircraft crashed in Florida near Tallahassee within an hour of departing Patrick AFB. Number 7. X-15 Flight 191. During X-15 Flight 191 on November 15, 1967, Michael J. Adams had his 7th flight and the plane had an electrical problem followed by control problems at the apogee of its flight. Adams was an American aviator, aeronautical engineer, and USAF astronaut. He was one of the 12 pilots who flew the North American X-15, an experimental space plane jointly operated by the Air Force and NASA. On November 15, 1967, Adams flew X-15 Flight 191, also known as X-15 Flight 36597, aboard the X-15-3, one of the 3 planes that X-15 had in its fleet. Flying to an altitude above 50 miles, Adams qualified as an astronaut, according to the United States definition of the boundary of space. Moments later, the aircraft broke apart, killing Adams and destroying the X-15-3. He was the first American space mission fatality by the American Convention. Number 6. Apollo 1. Apollo 1, initially designed as AS-204, was intended to be the first crewed mission of the Apollo program, the American undertaking to land the first man on the moon. It was planned to launch on February 21, 1967, as the first low Earth orbital test of the Apollo Command and Service Module. During a plugs-out test of the Apollo hardware, which its first version could be charitably described as a flying turd, a combination of factors including overpressure, pure oxygen environment, an egress hatch that opened inward, and excessive Velcro and other flammable material, plus a spark from somewhere under the astronauts' couches caused a cabin fire.
I was not talking to this before and it was
happened during a
off.
launch
I'm a
rehearsal
smooth
test
dumb
at
man.
Cape Kennedy Air Force Station, Launch Complex 34 on January 27th, and it killed all 3 crew members. 3 astronauts were killed, likely by inhalation of toxic fumes from the Velcro burning quickly. Number 5. Soyuz 11. Vlad Vlokov, Gregory Dubrovsky, and Viktor Palsov all died in space during the Soyuz 11 mission on June 30th, 1971. The astronaut crew successfully docked with the Salyut 1 orbital station and began its reactivation. On the 11th day of the mission, a fire broke out in the station, so it had to be abandoned. On June 29th, Soyuz 11 successfully undocked and began deorbiting. However, shortly after the separation from the ship, communication with the astronaut crew was interrupted. The descent vehicle landed successfully in the assigned area, but the rescue team found the astronauts dead. It was found that the astronaut death occurred as a result of depressurization and abrupt onset of decompression sickness. The astronauts tried to eliminate the air leak, however, in the extreme conditions of the fog that filled the cabin after depressurization, severe pain throughout the body, and loss of hearing due to burst eardrums, the astronauts did not immediately establish the cause of the leak and simply did not have enough time to save themselves. Number 4. Valentin Bonarenko. Valentin Bonarenko was a Soviet fighter pilot selected in 1960 for training as a cosmonaut. During a 15-day endurance experiment in a low-pressure altitude chamber with at least 50% oxygen atmosphere, Bondarenko, having completed work for the day, removed monitoring biosensors from his body and washed his skin with an alcohol-soaked cotton ball, which he then discarded. The cotton ball landed on an electric hot plate, which he was using to brew a cup of tea. The cotton ignited and Bonarenko tried to smother the flames with the sleeve of his woolen coveralls, which caught fire in the chamber's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Because of the pressure difference, it took a watching doctor nearly half an hour to open the chamber door. Bonarenko's clothing was burned until almost all the oxygen in the chamber was used up, and he had suffered third-degree burns over most of his body. The attending physician at Botkin Hospital, surgeon and traumatologist Vladimir Golahowski, recalled in 1984 that while attempting to start an intravenous drip, the only blood vessels he could find for inserting a needle were on the soles of his feet, where his flight boots had warded off the flames. The Soviet government concealed the death along with Bonarenko's membership.
Even if your team's not in the same place, your work can be. You just need Asana. Asana organizes work so teams know what to do, why it matters, and how to get it done. Try it for free at asana.com. That's ASANA.
Of the Cosmonaut Corps until 1880, and a crater on the moon's far side is now named after him. Number 3. Columbia Space Shuttle Crash. On the 1st of February 2003, the second space shuttle crash occurred. Shuttle Columbia was returning to Earth after 16 days of flight. Approximately 16 minutes before the expected landing, communication with the crew was interrupted. Eyewitnesses filmed the burning wreckage of the shuttle flying at an altitude of about 63 kilometers. All 7 astronauts were lost in space. They were Rick Husband, William C. McCool, Elon Ramon, Michael P. Anderson, Kampla Chawla, David M. Brown, and Laurel Clark. As the investigation showed, the cause of the disaster was a breakdown that arose back at the start. About 82 seconds into the flight, a piece of insulation detached from the left fairing, which struck the carbon fiber panel of the Columbia's left wing and probably left a hole in the thermal insulation layer. Because of this, after entering the dense layers of the atmosphere, the leading edge of the left wing began to heat up more than usual, and the wing began to collapse, and after it, the shuttle itself collapsed. Notably, incidents with detached pieces of thermal insulation from the shuttles were observed before, but test shows that they do not pose a threat to the astronauts. Losing Columbia became a turning point in the space shuttle program, and the shuttle astronaut flights were interrupted for several years, and in 2011, the program was finally closed due to the high risk of astronauts' lives. Number 2. Spaceship Two. On October 31st, 2014, another astronaut was lost in space. It was Michael Ellsbury, the pilot of the suborbital spacecraft Spaceship Two of Virgin Galactic. During the 55th test flight of the ship, serious anomalies were discovered, which led to the spacecraft crash. The cause was called crew error. The pilots unblocked the tail section of the vehicle ahead of time without gaining the necessary speed, and also did not perform the necessary actions to transfer the tail section to a vertical position. As a result, the ship began to rotate around its axis and then fell apart. The wreckage was scattered scattered all over a radius of 8 kilometers. First pilot Michael Ellsbury was killed, but co-pilot Peter Sebold managed to eject. The pilot astronaut survived but was seriously injured. Fortunately, the failure did not become fatal for the Richard Branson Company. Virgin Galactic worked out its bugs and in July 2021 carried out the first ever suborbital tourist space flight, ushering the area of space tourism. And coming in at number 1 is the Space Shuttle Challenger. In the 1980s, the era of space shuttles began, which finally established US supremacy in space. These were reusable rocket planes that made a real revolution in space tech, but still were not without significant shortcomings, which eventually became the cause of the biggest space travel disasters. Due to scheduling issues with what had been called GO fever, STS-51L launched in suboptimal temperatures on January 28, 1986. The cold weather weakened the O-rings that sealed each section of the tall, white, solid rocket booster segments and prevented the exhaust gases from shooting out of any direction but down. The seals failed over approximately 26 degrees of the arc on the starboard side of the SRB and the lowest of 4 segment joints. Exhaust flames escaped through the breach, pushing the SRB into the large rust-colored external tank. The starboard off strut then connected the SRB to the ET, was pushed into the hydrogen tank, which shot up through the intertank into the oxygen tank. This destroyed the ET structure entirely. The orbiter survived this event, but because of its orientation to the free flow, aerodynamic forces quickly disintegrated the orbiter. The crew compartment survived the breakup, and when recovered, it was discovered that several switches had been moved from their launch normal positions, indicating that the crew was conscious for some time after the breakup and tried to recover. The crew compartment impacted the ocean surface at a terminal velocity which was far too fast to survive, and all 7 members of the crew passed away. These members were F. Richard Scorby, Michael J. Smith, Ronald McNair, Elson Orzinka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McClough. To this day, it is still unknown whether the astronauts were conscious at the time of impact, although it's judged unlikely.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Dark Flow. Now, this wasn't in the past because it's technically very much still happening, and it is borderline terrifying. Now, I don't want to alarm anyone, but something bigger than anything we know of is sucking portions of the Milky Way galaxy just away. Sucking it away. Milky Way, us, we are getting sucked away. We're just gone. Just wanted to emphasize that. Now, in 2009, researchers discovered a cluster of galaxies that were moving at unparalleled speeds towards a patch of sky between the constellations Vela and Centaurus. There's just no reason for galaxies to be moving at that speed unless they're experiencing a huge pull from something beyond us. This process was dubbed Dark Flow, and scientists speculate that there are megastructures beyond our horizon that could be what's pulling them. Now, others even say the megastructures are parallel universes. And surely you guys know what my next question from here is. Now, if the Milky Way is getting sucked into the ether, how long till that reaches Earth? How much time does my ass have to planet hop? We need to do that ASAP, Rocky. Bye! And coming in at number 9 is the Alien music, which unfortunately cannot be found on Spotify or Apple Music, so you guys just don't even bother trying to find it, you know? Just don't bother. Now, back in 1969, 4 days after we stepped foot on the moon for the first time, astronauts John Young, Tom Strafford, and Gene Cernan were on the far dark side of the moon. And as Mufasa said to Simba, we don't go there. Now, the 3 men were just chilling on the moon, taking some pictures of the craters, and drinking some grape juice when they started hearing a strange, otherworldly sort of noise inside their headsets. Now, the music continued for a good hour, and none of the men had heard these types of sounds before, and they knew no one would believe them if they said anything. They tried to find out where or what the music was, but they just simply couldn't. Decades later, the mystery was never solved, but some claim it was just sound coming from radio interference between spacecrafts, which I get, but how would 3 seasoned astronauts not know what that sounded like? Like, they probably would have heard that a billion times, so I mean, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Sus. At number 8, we have space snakes. Now, if you thought you were smart, let me just put you in your place real quick. You may as well just sit down right now. So this one comes from Dr. Story Musgrave, a man who has 6 academic degrees, was part of the Marine Corps, is a physician and mathematician, and he's a bloody NASA astronaut as well. And oh, he shares the record of most space flights ever taken. So I mean, this man has literally lived 9 lives in one and like saved some for the rest of us. Like, I'm just trying to get by at this point. Either way, Story said on 2 of his missions he saw something out there that he doesn't have an answer to. He saw a snake sort of thing, and it was about 6 to 8 feet long, it was rubbery, and it had internal waves inside of it. And it sort of just follows you for an extended period of time. He claims that being in space makes you see things you'd never imagine. Well, no I didn't have to have 6 degrees to say that, and that he believes there are creatures out there much more developed than any of us. I mean, they've been there for 100 million years, I'd hope they're advanced as hell. I'd be disappointed if they weren't. Now honestly, my theory on the snake is that they're alien devices that just roam space and can detect spacecrafts in the area and sort of tail them and send information back to the alien HQ that deployed it. And I feel like that's a bang on theory. Like, go me. Yeah. Filling our number 7 slot is the near miss. So back in July of 2012, life as we know it was this close to being changed forever. This is how small my patience is when it comes to Che as well. Just letting you know. Now the Earth narrowly, like barely by the skin of our teeth, missed the impact of an extreme solar storm, and not just any storm, the most powerful one we'd seen in 150 years. If it had hit Earth, we would have still been picking up the pieces right now. If you don't know what a solar storm is, another name for it is a geomagnetic storm, and it's basically when the Earth's magnetosphere experiences a temporary disturbance due to either a solar wind shockwave and or a cloud of magnetic fields. Now solar storms threaten every form of high technology that we have. It starts off with an explosion that expends tons of X-rays and extreme UV radiation to Earth at light speed, because screw us, right? If we had been hit by the storm, there would have been radio blackouts, satellites would have been blasted with energy and been damaged, GPS navigation just wouldn't work, and the world would have no power whatsoever. I mean, we missed it that time, but who knows if we'll be as lucky the next time. I, Frank P, will be on Mars at that point, so I don't really give a even savage moments. Now at number 6 is the Cooper sighting. So Gordon Cooper is an astronaut that's flown the Gemini 5 and the Mercury 9. He was also the last American to ever spend time in space alone. Now in May of 1963, he was doing a circumnavigational trip around the Earth on the Mercury capsule, and when he was passing Perth, he saw something. A massive green glowing object came straight for him at a speed he'd never seen before. It was real, it wasn't just a delusion, and the Muchie tracking station in Western Australia even picked it up on their radar, so it was very much there. Cooper reported it to NBC, but when he landed was told they couldn't question him about it. So that's just another thing they won't tell us. I feel like we should honestly just start rioting until governments all over the world stop keeping from us. I'm over it. Just tell us things. Hello. Expose the government 2K19. Coming in at number 5 are sweat and urine. And that's it. That's all you need to know. On to number 4. No, I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? And that's it. Okay, jokes aside, space missions are long. You're in orbit for a very long time, and
the haunted crosswalk kicks things off in at number 10. Somewhere in South America on Google Maps, there is a crossroad, but there are some things you should know before you decide to cross the street at this busy intersection. Aside from looking both ways, before you cross, you might want to take extra precautions because you might stumble across a dark figure. According to the local legends, if you enter the middle, you will see everything go dark, and then you'll be met face to face with a shadowy figure known as the Crossroad Reaper. Well, here's a picture of the Reaper caught on Google Maps camera. Don't believe he's real? Well, why don't you try crossing the intersection yourself? And then you try to tell me you never saw him. Up next, number 9, we have the creepy Scientology base. The Church of Scientology has been involved in a ton of controversy over the years. From its treatment of its members to its highly secretive practices, a lot of people are actually scared of this religion. For people that aren't members, it's actually pretty hard to know what exactly is going on inside of their buildings. One of their churches called Trementina is one of the properties owned by Scientology that can be seen on Google Maps over in New Mexico. Well, take a look for yourselves. You guys are looking at it right now. Okay, what the heck is happening inside of this building? They say that they use it to preserve books and movies, but honestly, who knows? They could be performing satanic rituals for all we know. Nuclear testing facility makes its way onto this list at number 8. Here we have a picture of a Google satellite image of a nuclear testing facility located in Nevada. So yeah, probably pretty close to Area 51. I think the reason why you should never visit this location is it's highly obvious. It's definitely not open to the public, and I'm not sure why you would want to even attempt to step foot near this location, and that's because it is full of so much radiation. Mushroom clouds can be seen up to 100 miles away in the distance, so this actually caused a lot more tourists wanting to visit Las Vegas. My idea of a good time does not involve slot machines and clouds of nuclear radiation, but that's just my opinion. It's actually really scary to think about it, that the fact that we are testing deadly nuclear weapons. Helltown in New Baltimore brings us to number 7. A Google Street View car managed to capture this image on their camera. Could this just be an equipment glitch, or could something more sinister be going on in this small town? Apparently people in this area are saying that there is a portal to hell in the area. Residents of New Baltimore have been reported that their little town has been taken over by evil demonic entities, so of course Google sent out a car to get, you know, better pictures, more updated pictures, more accurate pictures. How about you bring them a couple of priests and it's time to bless the area. Next up, number 6, we have China's Area 51. What you're looking at right now could actually be China's version of Area 51. Is this real life right now? These strange white lines were discovered on Google Maps in the middle of China's Gobi Desert, and this image struck so many conversations online about what it could be. Most people believe that it's a calibration pattern for spy satellites, but then there are others that say that these lines prove aliens exist. These lines are located near the headquarters of China's space program. But unfortunately, we may never know the truth about what is really going on here. A very haunted bridge brings us to number 5. This is Booger Holler Bridge, and if you value your life, well, you'll never want to set foot or attempt to cross it, and that's because it is known to be extremely haunted. Legend has it that a father and son drowned while trying to cross the low bridge on a horse and buggy many years ago. And then there's another story about a woman and her child drowning when their car stalled on the bridge and the car was thrown into the river due to the strong current. People have even said that they can hear screams from the bridge, and people do satanic practices on it for some reason. So needless to say, the Google Street View car got close to the bridge, but they didn't dare cross it. Number 4, we have a creepy doll village. If you don't like looking at scary life-sized human dolls, then you'll never want to visit a small village in Nagoro, Japan. But in case you're curious, well, here's a taste of what you'll find there. Well, I told you that these dolls were creepy, but that's not all. Apparently an old lady will make a new doll every time someone in the village dies. So the amount of dolls outnumber the amount of people actually living in the village by about 10 to 1. I mean, could you imagine walking around at night and seeing all of these creepy dolls just staring at you? Couldn't they just be placed inside of an art gallery or something? This whole thing just makes me uncomfortable. So you know what, let's get the heck away from it and let's move on. Let's see what we have next. Scary underwater pyramids is up next at number 3. Well, this is an image taken from Google Maps that shows us that some creepy underwater pyramids might be lurking at the bottom of the ocean over in the Bahamas. This image sparked a lot of controversies when people said that these underwater pyramids could prove that aliens might be living among us. More reasonable people believe that these pyramids could have been made by an ancient civilization. But they also admit that we still can't rule out the existence of alien life forms, you know, just yet. A nuclear fallout zone steps onto this list at number 2. Pripyat, Ukraine, has a bad reputation of being the site of the worst nuclear disaster in history. It's literally a ghost town with abandoned buildings that will probably never be lived in for a very long time. But the creepiest part of this town has to be this picture right here. Well, take a look for yourselves. It's literally a room full of old gas masks that were left behind. I don't know what's scarier, the amount of gas masks or the fact that there were child-sized gas masks left inside of an abandoned school. And topping this list, and at number 1, we have one of the most dangerous cities on Earth. This right here is El Bronx, Colombia. And even though the city is completely demolished now, it was once known as the most dangerous city on Earth. This was a neighborhood that was known for child prostitution and murder. Put it this way, if you found yourself walking the streets of this neighborhood, something awful would probably happen to you. Some of these buildings also had a lot of rotting murder victims inside, and gangs used to capture and feed rival gang members to starving dogs just to send the other gang a message.
At number 10, we have Mogadishu, Somalia. Alright, we're gonna kick off this list with a place that has all the key points in a place you do not want to visit. Do they have kidnappings? Oh, you better believe it. Tourists who make the mistake of traveling alone can often get a burlap sack put right over their head and be on a one-way ticket to Ransom Town. If you are an American, there is an increased chance of you getting scooped up, so keep an eye out. Actually, it is recommended that you travel with a bodyguard. Okay, so they have that, but do they also have gangs? Yes, sir, they do. Gang violence is a regular thing and civilians are killed all the time. And the cherry on top is there also is a very unstable government with a military constantly walking through the streets. Not to mention the people are suffering suffering. So unless you're traveling with military protection and you have the need to stabilize an unstable country, maybe choose Cancun for your next vacation. At number 9, we have the Siatrem River in Indonesia. In places all over the world, resources are so tight that people are forced to exploit their environment. The Siatrem River is a living representation of this. It's located in Indonesia and there's very little infrastructure around there for these people to live a clean and healthy life. So they resort to taking what they can from the land. This river is extremely polluted because the 5 million people who live there have to use it to bathe, water crops, dispose of waste, dispose of garbage, and drink. The river has been so polluted that any wildlife that used to call this place home has either left or died. It is terrible to see a place where people are forced to live without clean drinking water. At number 8, we have the Queen's Bath, Hawaii. There are beautiful beaches, parties everywhere, and enough drunk tourists to make a conga line all the way to the American mainland. But it's the wonderful attractions that can lure people into a false sense of security. On the island of Kauai, there's an absolutely breathtaking formation called the Queen's Bath. It is a natural pool formed right into the rock bed of the island. It kind of looks like a place royalty would come to dip their feet in while they drink champagne and laugh about stealing the world's resources. But this place is similar to a Venus flytrap. Gorgeous to look at, but when you get too close, it can be dangerous. People will often go swimming in the Queen's Bath, and then a very strong wave will come through and either bash them against the rocks or wash them out to sea. There are tons of warning signs trying to tell tourists that they should not go swimming in this pool. But every year, tourists either drown or need to be rescued. At number 7, we have Syria. Syria has been in constant turmoil for many years. First, there was constant civil war. The rebel soldiers battling the government every single day in an attempt to liberate Syria from the oppressive government. This meant that warfare was commonplace in the streets. And then ISIS took over a major chunk of Syria, which obviously meant that the violence only escalated. Then the American troops had to come in and try and push out ISIS, which meant even more war. It seems like the struggles in Syria will never end. Can everyone there just call a timeout? Everyone just stop fighting for 2 minutes and then just be friends and see what happens. I think that is the worst advice I have ever given anyone. Yeah, Che, you can stop war by everyone just being friends. And that's why I'm making top 10 lists and I'm not in politics. At number 6, we have Oymyakon, Russia. Here's something about me. I love warm weather. If it's 40 plus Celsius and I'm sweating at home just from putting on my pants, I've never been happier. So this place would be hell on earth for me. Oymyakon is the coldest inhabited place in the world. 500 people live there year round for some unknown reason. They must like it when it gets so cold that your eyeballs freeze inside your head, which is a real thing that can happen. The temperature can drop to negative 62 degrees Celsius. That's minus 80 Fahrenheit. It would be so cold I would want to cry out, but my tear ducts would be frozen, so all I would be able to do is scream and pray for death. One of the weirdest things about this place is it's actually a tourist attraction. People will choose to go to the coldest village on the earth rather than eating pizza in Italy. If you're that kind of person, don't talk to me. I don't need your weird vibes getting on me. I'm vibing all the time. I don't want your bad cold vibes in my life, okay? One of the main tourist attractions at this place is a giant thermometer that will remind you how much fun you're having by showing you the lip-slicing temperatures. And one time, it got so cold in this village that the thermometer broke. What the hell? At number 5, we have Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This one is a toss-up. I would probably go to Rio. Rio's an amazing city. It's filled with some of the most gorgeous people you've ever seen in your life. They have the amazing Carnival Festival where you can party for days and probably fall in and out of love 10 times. Brazilian food is amazing. You can go to a Brazilian steakhouse and eat enough meat that you'll get meat sweats that soak right through your shoes. But Rio definitely has a darker side. Rio's one of the most dangerous cities on the planet. There is a ton of gang violence, with Rio being a major hotspot for drug trafficking and gun trade. You also have a good chance of getting kidnapped or murdered. So when you're picking your next vacation spot, you gotta decide how bad you want to see people dance on a float during Carnival. At number 4, we have Lake Nyos, Cameroon. Back in August of 1986, a giant cloud of carbon dioxide erupted out of the bottom of Lake Nyos. This invisible cloud of death spread fast at 50 kilometers an hour and ended up killing 1,700 people. This is the kind of thing where legends of gods and monsters come from. If this happened when an ancient civilization was living there, they wouldn't have known that this was caused by a giant carbon cloud from a nearby volcano. They would have thought it was some sort of demonic forest and they needed to sacrifice things. They would have been afraid of this lake until the end of time. But thankfully, we have computers to tell us what happened. A seismic shift caused gas from a volcano to come through Lake Nyos. This is normal, but the gas usually is released slowly, not in these massive amounts like this. Since this happened, scientists have developed a way to extract gas from the base of the lake, preventing it from happening again. But even though they're taking safety measures, you won't catch me anywhere near this place. At number 3, we have the Ganges River, India. The Ganges River in India is one of the most polluted rivers on the planet. If you thought the river Siatra was bad, it has nothing on the Ganges. This river is used for sewage, personal waste, and the waste of major companies. And get this, over 500 million people use this river regularly. Some people come visit it every day because they believe it has holy powers that can heal you, which is absolutely not true. The river is actually packed with harmful chemicals that cause cancer. From all the constant traffic of people visiting the river, it's only getting more polluted. There is trash that is left there every day from all the people that make the trip. And there isn't even a proper cleaning system, so the problem is only getting worse. At number 2, we have the Skeleton Coast, Namibia. This place has all the pieces of an environment that is trying to kill you. I mean, it's called the Skeleton Coast, for God's sake. They didn't call it sexy, fun Margarita Beach. No, they didn't. First off, we have very harsh waters. The tides and waves are so unpredictable that you can see the shells of all the shipwrecks along the coast. Everything from major tankers to little tugboats can be seen broken down along this beach. If you're one of the people who are unlucky enough to get shipwrecked here and survived by swimming to the mainland, you would now be in one of the worst deserts on the planet. It is extremely dry with almost zero water sources and spans hundreds of kilometers. There's also this eerie fog effect that comes off the ocean and covers the desert, meaning you could be lost in a brutal landscape without being able to see 10 feet in front of you because the fog is so thick. That sounds like a pleasant way to die. At number 1, we have Caracas, Venezuela. Okay, for the number 1 spot, we have one of the most hostile cities on the planet, so strap in. The entire country of Venezuela has been at war with its own government for years now. Protesters are shot and killed in the streets on a regular basis, and all this chaos has seemed to be boiled down to Caracas. People desperately want their freedom from the oppressive government, and on top of that, there's an insane amount of organized crime. You have drug lords moving products to the city constantly, and hijackings are a regular occurrence. And it's suggested that you never wear anything expensive when you're walking through the street because people will rob it right off your body. So leave your Gucci sneakers at home unless you want to be walking around barefoot. To give you a little perspective, if you Google countries with the most murders right now, Caracas will be number 3.
Starting off this countdown, we have Costa Concordia. On January 13th of 2012, the Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia sadly crashed into underwater rocks. This resulted in the ship capsizing and sinking. Sadly, 32 passengers lost their lives in this tragedy, and Google Earth caught it on camera. It has photos of the ship laying on its side, which is a dark reminder of this tragedy. The captain of the ship ended up being charged with multiple counts of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison as people argued that he delayed the evacuation of the ship, and then he fled the ship and left the crew and passengers to fend for themselves. In our 9th spot, we have the disappearance. On November 7th of 1997, 40-year-old William Moult was reported missing after going out one night and never returning home. Sadly, the police had no leads as to where William could be or what happened to him. The case went cold for 20 years. That's when Google Earth found William. Basically, a housing development manager was using Google Earth to check out some properties when he saw something strange in a pond near the homes. Turns out this weird thing was William's car. The police ended up dragging the pond and retrieved his car. William's body was found in there as well. The only mystery that remains is how William ended up driving into the pond in the first place. In our 8th spot, we have the secret bunker. Hidden in the New Mexico desert is a secret bunker surrounded by strange symbols. These symbols were thought to be done by the works of aliens. Anyways, the bunker is located close to these symbols, and it's said to be the alien space cathedral of the Church of Scientology. Former Scientologist Ron Hubbard says that the symbols mark a return point for reincarnation. The bunker even has its own private airstrip for the church's leaders. In 2005, it was confirmed that this bunker does indeed exist. This bunker is said to be the place where members can travel to in the future from other places in the universe. Moving on to number 7, we have the Blood Red Lake. Just outside of Sadr City in Iraq, there is a lake that is completely red, hence why it was given the name Blood Red Lake. The reason as to why it's red remains a mystery, but of course, we have some theories. One is that pollution or sewage caused it to turn red. Another is that it's a result of the water treatment process. Whereas others believe that the lake is red from blood running into it from a slaughterhouse. To this day, no one has offered an official explanation as to why this river looks like blood. In our sixth spot today, we have the oil refinery. The Hungarian oil refinery Százhalombatta is so private that they wanted Google Earth to block them out. But instead of blurring it or barring it with a black box, they asked Google to have it colored green, and no one knows why. Now it just looks like a weird football field. A lot of people are wondering what they're trying to protect or hide from us. Hopefully they aren't trying to hide some illegal or shady activity that they're into. We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with the French nuclear facility. La Hague is a nuclear fuel reprocessing facility in France that opened in 1976. It is responsible for treating nuclear...
Anything else would be uncivilized.
Hey! In at the number 10 spot, we have good teenagers take off your clothes, and that was a phrase said in the popular movie Aladdin. What? So in the scene, Aladdin and the magic carpet fly up to Jasmine's balcony, only to find Jasmine's tiger Raja was up there. You can hear a little subtle voice in the background that supposedly says, "Good teenagers, take off your clothes." In order to hear this, you actually have to turn up your TV really loud. Disney released a statement saying, in the movie Aladdin, it doesn't actually say that. What? What are you guys hearing? It actually says, "Come on, good kitty, take off and go." The rumor started in 1993 when Aladdin was released to VHS. And at the number 9 spot, the word sex is spelled out in the Lion King movie. A 4-year-old boy from New York actually spotted this image while he was watching the movie. So just around halfway through the movie, there was a cloud of dust that forms when Simba, Pumbaa, and Timon were gazing into the stars while on a cliff. If you actually watch carefully, the newly formed dust appears to spell out S-E-X. Of course, Disney had a rebuttal, and they said that the image actually spells S-F-X, and there's not that line on that E. It was inserted by the special effects group, so it's supposed to spell like special effects abbreviated. Things are looking up into the number 8 spot. Well, I'm talking about the minister's erection in The Little Mermaid. So during Ursula's wedding scene, you can notice something protruding from the minister's pelvic region. And it looks like someone is more excited about this wedding than Ursula. Although it does look like an erection, if you look at this scene from a different angle, it's the minister's knee, and it's just badly positioned. Okay, so in at number 7, it's gonna have you questioning your eyesight, because I'm talking about the movie poster of The Lion King. So back in 2002, The Lion King was re-released in theaters for limited time, and this is a popular movie poster from it. At first glance, the poster seems innocent, right? It has Simba on the cover, but if you look closely, it looks like a semi-naked girl wearing what appears to be a thong. This is either Disney being very clever, or we just have too many people in the world with dirty minds. But now I probably just ruined your guys' childhood, because you're always gonna see that image, and I'm sorry. Okay, so The Little Mermaid makes a second appearance on this list, and they come into number 6. I mean, we're talking about the damn Little Mermaid here, and they're making this list twice. And that's because a penis appears to be on the front cover of the VHS movie. So on the cover of the VHS, it seems that one of the castle's tips resembles a penis. And because of this, the castle is often referred to as the phallic palace. And phallic is like another term for penis. It was reported that an angry artist tried to like sneak this image in there, and this is to get revenge because he was gonna get laid off. However, on the newly released version of The Little Mermaid, you don't see this image appear on the cover. Okay, so in at the number 5 spot, we have the naked person that appeared in The Rescuers. During this scene, when Bernard and Bianca are riding around the city in a sardine tin, if you pay attention, you'll notice a naked woman through a window in the background. Disney actually made this subliminal message public, and they claim that she was put into the film during the post-production. On January 8th of 1999, Disney decided to recall 3.4 million copies of the 1977 animated movie. Well, if you thought things couldn't get any more shocking, well, I'm sorry to say it does. And this next one comes in to number we have more penis imagery, and this time in the Hercules. Dr. Hercules punches out the River Guardian monster. A horseshoe hits him right on the forehead, which causes him an awkward-looking bump to grow out of his head. It eventually grew into a penis shape, including morphing his eyebrows into a set of testicles. Okay, this next image happens in Alice in Wonderland, and this comes into number 3. So I think we can all clearly see what this rabbit hole looks like. And I'm not sure why Disney feels the need to insert all these sexual innuendos in children's movies. Not only is this image seen in the film, a lot of people say that Alice in Wonderland has a lot of drug references such as cocaine, speed, LSD, nitrous oxide, crystal meth, MDMA, marijuana, mushrooms, opium, and nicotine. I'm not really sure what's happening in this movie, but I think Alice needs some help because that woman takes a whole lot of drugs. Okay, so Mickey Mouse makes an entrance into number 2, and that's because he's caught holding a penis. This image is an internet favorite. Minnie's dress makes a subliminal penis shape in Mickey's hand, which confirms a lot of people's beliefs that Disney sexualizes their content and displays it for a vulnerable audience. Okay, so we've all made it to the moment you guys have all been waiting for. We're in at number 1. But quickly, let's recap everything we've had. We've had the Little Mermaid and all the penises. We've heard Aladdin tell teenagers to take off their clothes. We've seen the sex words in Clouds, a naked woman in The Rescuers. Alice might be using a whole lot of drugs, but in at number 1, things get a whole lot worse. And we're talking about the movie The Monsters, Inc. That did really good in the movie theaters and was seen by a lot of people. So what are we talking about? Well, this graphic image, which was allegedly seen in the final scenes of The Monsters, Inc., it depicts what appears to be a children's drawing of 2 people in a compromising position. This image has been circulated all over the internet, and it's left people wondering if this image is real or if it's just a hoax. So I looked into it a little bit more, and it actually turned out that this isn't the image used in the movie. Someone photoshopped this really well and was able to like spread this rumor. And that's the reason why it comes into this list in at number 1, because it even fooled me. However, it was confirmed that animators working on the film created this image as a joke, so this was created by someone who worked on the movie. Disney just knows how to pick them.
Number 10, Drake and Josh. Josh is gone. We're actually going to kick off this list with a show that I have never seen before. Really, for 2 reasons. This show was a little after my time. By the time the show came out, I had learned what HBO was. And when things like The Sopranos are on TV, Drake and Josh just doesn't really cut it. And 2, when I was younger, I didn't really want to watch shows with real people in them. They just seemed boring to me. Why would I watch a show about 2 brothers bickering when Moses was splitting the Red Sea with a Beyblade? Much better television. But in the episode Josh is Gone, Drake and Josh have a major falling out that ruins their friendship. And throughout the episode, we see Drake's life unravel until he reaches a major breaking point. At the end of the episode, they hang out again, but the friendship isn't entirely repaired. The whole episode kind of has this dark underlying tone that sometimes you lose your friends, and in real life, these guys aren't even friends anymore. Number 9, Adventure Time Apocalypse. Now, this one doesn't cover a specific episode because there are so many episodes in Adventure Time that reference the world that existed before the Candy Kingdom.
Hey, good morning. I made you breakfast. It's mostly pine needles and deer guts.
Worse. Basically, it seems like there was a full contemporary metropolis that was very similar to our world, but there was a massive disaster. Kind of like that gigantic asteroid that barely missed the Earth last week. Yeah, that one that was the size of the Statue of Liberty that would have wiped out an entire continent. If you don't know about that, give it a quick Google search. It'll remind you that nothing matters. But back to Adventure Time. Throughout the show, we get flashbacks to what the world used to be like, and we even get exposed to what happened to all the people. It seems like everyone got turned into some sort of zombie-like creature with green goo oozing out of their faces. Now on to number 8, we got Rocco Goes to Hell. Rocco's modern life was great. You had a well-dressed wallaby who was best friends with a cow, and the 2 would go on some pretty strange adventures together. But in one episode, Rocco Goes to Heck, we see the show take a pretty dark turn. Rocco's best friend Heifer chokes to death and ends up in hell. Let's just start there. Having your friend choked to death in front of you is a pretty horrible thing to see. You would have to spend plenty of paychecks on therapy to have that one scrubbed from your brain. Then we go to after Heifer dies and is inside hell, which in the show is named Heck for the younger viewers. Once Hef arrives in the burning underworld, we get to meet Peaches, who is the Rocco's modern life version of the devil. Peaches then starts to do what I assume the devil does best, which is, of course, torture. This then leads us to watching Heifer going through all sorts of strange torments. I think letting kids know that they could be thrown into hell at any moment is a little bit much to take on. Let them find out they're going straight to hell like the rest of us. Number 7, the Danny Phantom opening credits. Having ghost powers is a great original concept. We don't really know what ghosts are or even if they exist, so you can play around with it as much as you want. And he had a very diverse group of friends in the show. The show was really ahead of its time. But what if the backbone of the show, the accident that gave Danny his ghost powers, didn't actually happen?
When it didn't quite work, his folks, they just quit. But then Danny took a look inside of it. There was a great big flash, everything changed. His molecules got all rearranged.
Well, the accident happened, but instead of giving him ghost powers, it sent him blasted into a coma, and all the crazy adventures he goes on are just figments of his imagination in a coma state. There have been cases of people in comas where they can hear what's going on around them. So maybe Danny Fenton is in a coma, and all the different characters that are around him are the doctors, nurses, and visitors that are coming in to see him. Maybe the reason he goes between ghost and human form is because he's constantly on the edge of life and death. Number 6, episode 29 of The Amanda Show. The Amanda Show was one of the best kids sketch shows of all time. It set up Amanda Bynes to be one of the biggest comedy stars ever. But then, of course, her life took a turn for the wild side and she started saying things about how she wanted to bang Drake. Then she got those permanent dimple piercings, you know, those ones that make you look like you never say no to bathroom drugs? Well, before all this went down, her show had an episode with themes that were a little bit more on the risky side. In episode 29 of The Amanda Show, it starts out with an Italian man who explodes out of nowhere. Then later in the episode, it's followed by a sketch with a family known as the Luckless. They are so unlucky that nothing lucky ever happens to them. This sketch ends with a meteor smashing into the Luckless's home and destroying it. Now, on their own, these sketches aren't too bad, but if you wrap in the fact that this episode aired right before 9/11, then you can see why it was taken off the air. A man blowing himself up and a flying object destroying a building would have for sure been in bad taste. And the underlying theme that people might think is there is that it's all conspiracy theory, and the Amanda Show people were trying to tell us what was gonna happen. Probably not, but who knows. Number 5, Steve Does Drugs, Blue's Clues. By the time Blue's Clues came out, I was already too old. The anime era had grabbed me, and I wasn't some juvenile kid anymore watching baby shows. I was an angsty preteen who would cry if he misplaced one of his shiny Pokemon cards. Much more mature. But I do know that the show is about a guy walking around his house, talking to inanimate objects, trying to find clues. He's doing this because it's a fun way to teach kids. Or is the dark message behind the show that Steve is a former detective who worked a case so disturbing that it broke him mentally? Now he spends his days dosing himself with enough drugs to hallucinate and forget the case that tore him down. The detective theory explains why a grown man is so interested in clues, and the drugs explain why he can talk to salt shakers. Either that or he has the worst superpower of all time. I would like to see a dark noir version of Blue's Clues where Steve is trying to solve the murder of a young girl and he has to beat answers out of a fire hydrant. That would be interesting. Number 4 is SpongeBob Dying for Pie. So how did all the characters in the SpongeBob universe come to be sentient beings with complex emotions and an entire society similar to our own? Is it all made up? Or is it because they're sea creatures that got blasted with nukes and now they all got mutated? That's how life starts, right? You blast things with nuclear energy and then everyone gets smarter. Well, the theory is that the underwater world of Bikini Bottom got all of its super intelligent life forms from nuclear bomb testing. This theory is kind of backed up by the episode Dying for Pie, where SpongeBob has a pie with a bomb in it, and when it goes off, it's a nuclear level explosion.
I was saving it in my pocket for us to share. Let's eat. Oops.
This would mean that the people in Bikini Bottom have access to nukes and could be the next global superpower. You don't just get nukes out of nowhere. Maybe they got access to nukes from a failed nuclear test where the bomb didn't go off. They then took it and made themselves someone to be respected at the next UN meeting. Number 3, iCarly, the Nora Dershlet episodes. This is a